Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from, also what time is it. They say no one ever really leaves Wither Lane. The locals don't talk about it. The town maps don't mark it. GPS reroutes you if you try to find it. Yet, somehow, people still go there, and when they do, they either vanish or change in ways that are far worse. No one expected Lena Morrigan to go looking for the house on Wither Lane. 27 years old, sharp as broken glass, and just as cutting. She was a photojournalist with a nose for stories that made your skin crawl. Murders, disappearances, conspiracies. The uglier, the better. She'd built her career on chasing the things no one else wanted to see. But this was different. This one wasn't about glory or money. It was personal. Her brother Noah had vanished a year ago. No note, no goodbye. Just gone. The only clue he left behind was a single photo emailed to her from his encrypted address, a crooked Victorian house sagging under the weight of time, its shutters like eyelids half closed in sleep or death. Scrawled in the corner in Noah's barely legible handwriting were two words: "Find me." The image metadata had a location, an address no one else could verify. But Lena did her digging, cross-referencing old land records, interviewing silent-eyed townies who refused to speak above whispers. Eventually, she found it. Wither Lane, a road that shouldn't exist. A house that defied logic. She should have walked away. She almost did. But on the anniversary of his disappearance, Lena got another email. No subject line, no text. Just a new photo. Same house. But this time, the windows weren't empty. In the second floor window to the right, there was someone watching. A silhouette. And that silhouette had the exact shape of Noah's narrow shoulders and curly, unkempt hair. Lena packed her camera, her pistol, a flashlight, and 2 days' worth of food. And she drove. She reached the turnoff just past Dern Hollow, where Route 17 veers into dense pine woods. There was no sign for Wither Lane. Her GPS glitched and froze when she got close. Still, she turned onto the dirt road anyway, guided by instinct, or maybe something else. The trees hung heavy overhead like they were listening. Her tires crunched on gravel, and the deeper she drove, the less her car seemed to want to go forward. A warning on wheels. The air changed. Too still. Too quiet. Like the woods were holding their breath. The house appeared suddenly at the curve of the road, rising out of the earth like it had been waiting. It looked exactly like the photos, 2 stories, rotting paint, windows dark and deep. The kind of house you knew had heard screams. The front door hung slightly ajar. Lena stepped out, slamming her car door harder than she meant to. It sounded like a gunshot in the silence. The wind didn't blow. The birds didn't sing. Even the insects refused to buzz. She approached the house slowly, her camera hanging from her neck, her flashlight trembling in her grip. The porch creaked under her weight. She pushed the front door open. It didn't resist. The air inside was colder than it should have been. Dust coated everything like ash after a fire. The living room was full of relics. Torn curtains, a broken grandfather clock, cracked photographs on the wall. Each frame tilted just slightly off balance. But it was the smell that struck her first. Rotting wood mixed with something wetter, darker, like mildew or blood. She called out once, "Noah." Silence. Then a soft click from upstairs. Lena froze. That wasn't a creak. It was deliberate. Like someone had stepped on the landing with purpose. She pulled her pistol and flashlight at the same time, beam slicing through the gloom. She moved carefully, 1 step at a time. Dust danced in the light like ash falling upward. The staircase groaned under her weight, each step a protest. She reached the second floor. There were 4 doors, 2 on each side of a narrow hallway. One door was ajar. The others were closed, their wood swollen with age. She pushed open the first one on the right. The room was empty except for a child's crib. It rocked gently, though there was no breeze. Hanging above it was a mobile made of bones, small ones. Bird, maybe. Maybe not. The second door was locked. And she rattled the knob, and something on the other side rattled back. She stepped back. The third door, the one at the end of the hallway, was slightly open. Just like in the photo. The window behind it faced the driveway. She stepped in. A mirror hung crooked on the wall. Her reflection didn't match her movement. She raised her gun. The reflection didn't. She blinked. It was normal again. She turned to the window, and her blood turned to ice. There were fresh footprints on the floor leading to the window. Bare feet, narrow, human. They ended at the sill. But the window was shut from the inside. Suddenly, she heard it again. Click, back in the hallway. She spun around and aimed her flashlight. The second door, the one that had been locked, was open now. And something was standing in the doorway. She didn't breathe, didn't move. Her beam landed on the figure, but it revealed nothing. Just the outline of a person, and eyes. Pale eyes that looked too wide. Too hungry. No, she asked, voice cracking. The thing didn't answer, but it tilted its head, and in that second, Lena realized something horrible. It looked like Noah, yes, but wrong, taller, thinner. Like someone had stretched his image too far and smeared the features just enough. It smiled, and teeth glinted. Not flat and human, but pointed. She didn't scream. She fired. The bullet hit the door frame as the thing vanished. No footsteps, no rush. It just wasn't there anymore. She backed into the room again, slammed the door, and locked it. Heart pounding like a drum beat, she scanned for any other exits. Then she noticed the closet. It was half open. Inside, something breathed. She stepped forward, swallowing her fear. A low, wheezing inhale echoed from the gap. She raised her gun and yanked the door open. Nothing. Just a coat, some dust, a few rusted hangers, and then she heard whispering, soft, close. Behind her. She turned. The mirror, this time her reflection didn't move at all. And behind her reflection, in the mirror, the figure stood, grinning. She turned in real life. No one there. Turned back to the mirror, still grinning. She smashed the glass with the butt of her flashlight. It didn't break. Her reflection only grinned wider. Then she saw it. In the reflection's hand, something dangling. A necklace. Her brother's. He never took it off. And in that moment, the room began to shift. The walls stretched like skin pulled too tight. The window twisted, the floor groaned, and Lena felt her balance slip. The house was moving. No, not the house. Her. She was no longer on the second floor. The window now looked out over water. Black, endless water with something moving beneath the surface. And faint screams, distant, warped like echoes through glass, rose from below. She stumbled backward. The door was gone. Only the mirror remained. And the thing inside it was reaching out now. Hand pressed against the glass like it was thinning. The mirror cracked, just slightly. She didn't know what would happen if it broke fully. She ran. She bolted straight into the wall, only to find it gave way like paper. She crashed through, tumbling down a narrow set of stairs she hadn't seen before. She landed hard, head spinning. When her eyes cleared, she was in the basement, but it wasn't empty. Photographs lined the walls. Hundreds, maybe thousands, all of people. All of them looking at the camera with the same expression. Mouths open, eyes wide, mid-scream, and pinned in the center was a Polaroid of her brother. Except this time, he wasn't alone. He was standing in front of the house, and Lena was next to him, smiling. She staggered backward, knocking over something metal. A box. It crashed open. Inside were tapes, cassette, VHS, even mini DV, all labeled. But one had her name on it. She picked it up, shaking. Just 3 words written in sharp ink: "You were here." Behind her, the basement door creaked. She turned. And she heard her own voice whisper from the dark, "Welcome back." The first thing Lena noticed was that the air had changed. It was no longer just cold. It was wet. Not damp, but truly wet, like the walls had been crying. Moisture clung to her skin as if invisible hands were trying to stick to her. Every breath felt like drinking fog. She turned slowly toward the voice that had whispered, "Welcome back." But no one was there. The basement was still. The broken box of tapes sat at her feet, the one with her name. "You were here?" Now lying sideways on the ground. But it wasn't just a label anymore. The writing was gone, replaced with a smeared red handprint across the cassette's surface. Fresh. Wet. Her flashlight flickered. One blink. Two. Dark. Then back again. And when the light steadied, the tapes were gone. All of them. The shelves were bare, wiped clean in a matter of seconds. The only thing that remained on the cold concrete floor was a single photo. Lena bent down, fingers trembling, and picked it up. It was her, standing in the mirror from earlier. Except in this photo, her eyes were black. Not just shadowed or edited. Black, like someone had scooped the life out of them. And her mouth, it was open wider than it should have been. Like the jaw had unhinged. Like it was screaming without making a sound. Lena dropped the photo. She had to get out. She scrambled up the stairs, pushing her shoulder into the rotted basement door until it groaned open. She emerged not into the hallway where she had been earlier, but into a hallway she didn't recognize. The wallpaper was peeling, but this one was a sickly green, not the dusty blue she remembered. The wood beneath her feet wasn't warped, but fresh, polished, clean. That didn't make sense. She hadn't left the house. But this hallway, it was newer, renovated, restored, and she could hear something. Music. Distant piano chords drifting from somewhere above, played slowly, hesitantly, like someone was learning, making mistakes. She followed the sound, moving through the house like it was shifting to allow her passage. Every door she passed had no knob, just smooth wood as if the openings were sealed into memory. The music got louder, sharper, more aggressive, then suddenly cut off. The silence that followed was worse than the tune. Because in the silence, Lena could hear something else. Breathing, not her own. She turned a corner and found herself at the bottom of another staircase. But this one wasn't decayed and creaky. The carpet runner was pristine, gold-threaded, ornate. She climbed. Halfway up, she paused. The walls around her, she hadn't noticed them before, were lined with portraits. But the faces in the paintings were blurred, like they'd been dipped in water and left to melt. Eyes ran down into mouths. Noses bled into collars. Every figure looked like it had once been human, but time, or something darker, had stolen their identity. At the top of the stairs, a single door stood ajar. She pushed it open. A bedroom, immaculate. The bed was made. Fresh flowers in a glass vase sat beside it. But Lena felt sick the moment she stepped in. Because everything in the room was exactly the same as Noah's old room back when they were kids. Same posters. Same books on the shelf. Even the same water stain on the ceiling shaped like a crooked star. Her throat tightened. This room should not be here. She moved to the desk, running her fingers along the old wood. There were scribbled notebooks on the surface. Noah's handwriting, fast and jagged, filled with nonsense at first glance. But the more she looked, the more it formed patterns. Words repeated again and again. It hears you, it hears you, it hears you. Below that mirror is not the way out, it's the door. Don't look at it too long. She turned toward the far wall where a mirror hung. Oval, gold-framed, just like the one that hadn't reflected her earlier. This one was worse. This one did reflect her. But it was wrong. In the glass, Lena stood motionless while her real body stepped closer. She waved her hand. The reflection didn't wave back. It stared, motionless, eyes wide. Then her reflection began to smile, slowly, deliberately. Lena stepped back. The smile stopped. She stepped forward. The reflection smiled again. She couldn't tear her eyes away. The closer she got, the more detail she saw in the background of the mirror. Not just the room, but something behind her reflection. Something in the dark, shapes, moving, reaching. She yanked her gaze away. From the corner of her eye, the reflection kept moving even after she stopped. She turned to leave the room and nearly screamed. The doorway was gone, just wall now. Smooth, seamless. She ran to it, slamming her fists against the surface. Nothing gave. She turned to the mirror, still smiling, but now, the reflection had something in its hand. The same cassette tape. You were here. Her flashlight dimmed again. When it lit back up, there was someone else in the reflection. Standing beside the other Lena. Close. Too close. A tall figure in shadows. Barely more than a smudge, but unmistakable. The figure reached up and placed its hand on the reflection's shoulder. The smile on mirror, Lena grew wider. Too wide. The figure in the mirror raised its other hand. On its palm, a message had been carved, deep, ragged letters forming two words. STLDEAD. The mirror cracked, this time for real. A thin fracture shot from corner to corner like a spider web. Lena turned and found the bedroom around her beginning to decay, rapidly. Wallpaper peeled itself off the walls. The bed collapsed inward. The flowers in the vase turned black and rotted in seconds. Mold spread across the carpet like a wave. And behind her, the mirror shattered. She didn't look back. She threw her shoulder into the wall, again and again, until something gave way. A hole opened. She fell through it and landed hard on wood. She was in the attic. At least, she thought it was the attic. The air was thick with dust and the smell of something burnt. Light filtered in through a narrow window, illuminating a rocking chair. And in that chair, something sat. She aimed her flashlight. The figure was wrapped in a patchwork quilt, face hidden in shadow. Breathing. Shallow. Raspy. She didn't want to approach, but she had to. She stepped closer. The chair creaked. The figure shifted, tilting its head slightly, as if listening. Then it whispered, "You left me here." Lena's knees went weak. "No." The figure stirred. "You shouldn't have come back," it rasped. She stepped closer, and with every inch, the smell grew stronger, burnt wood and rotting meat. Her flashlight flickered again, and in that brief moment of darkness, the figure stood up. When the beam came back on, it was gone. The chair still rocked, but it wasn't empty. Sitting where the figure had been was another photo. Lena picked it up with trembling fingers. It was her again. But this time, she was lying in a bed, eyes closed, mouth open, and a shape, blurred and massive, loomed over her, its face pressed inches from hers. In the bottom corner of the photo, one word was scrawled. Soon. The window behind her shattered. She spun. A scream built in her throat, but nothing came out. From the broken glass, a rope of shadow slithered in like smoke, fast and alive. It coiled around her wrist and yanked. She stumbled forward, caught her balance, and tore free, but not before it left a mark. 3 long, black bruises like fingers burned into her skin. She ran, back down the attic stairs, back into the house that shifted every time she blinked. Hallways twisted. Doors moved. Furniture rotted and bloomed again. The house was alive, and it remembered her. At the bottom of the stairs, the front door waited. Open. The night outside was black and still. She sprinted for it, made it across the threshold. Outside, freedom. She turned back. The house was gone. Only the forest stood behind her, silent. And on the dirt path at her feet, a trail of photos leading into the trees. Every one of them showed her. And in every photo, she was a little more wrong. Lena didn't want to pick up the photos, but she couldn't stop herself. Her fingers moved on their own, trembling as they grasped the first one from the dirt path. In it, she stood at the edge of the forest, arms outstretched like a scarecrow. Eyes rolled back into her skull. Something dangled from her mouth, a string of teeth, human and small, as if plucked from a child. Her stomach turned, but her feet followed the trail. Each photo was worse than the last. In the second, she was crawling. Knees scraped raw, mouth open in a howl of pain or rage. Her eyes were hollow, sockets full of ash. Behind her in the photo stood the house, different now, taller, its windows glowing red, smoke curling from the chimney in the shape of screaming faces. By the third photo, she saw herself hanging from a tree branch, arms limp, eyes staring directly at the lens. Her head was tilted at an unnatural angle, like her neck had forgotten how to hold it up. But in that one, she was smiling, a grotesque, satisfied grin. Lena dropped it and nearly vomited into the underbrush. The woods around her were silent, too silent, like sound itself had been swallowed. Not even the wind dared to rustle the trees. And the trees, they weren't right. Every trunk was tall, too tall, like they'd grown without stopping. Their bark looked wet and pulsing, as if the trees had veins just beneath the surface. And the knots in the wood weren't knots. They were eyes. They watched her. Everywhere she turned, they blinked. She wanted to scream, but knew if she did, something would hear it. Something that wasn't bound by sight alone. Lena kept moving. The photos beckoned her like breadcrumbs through madness. She didn't know how far she'd walked. Minutes, hours. Time stretched in the woods, unspooling like old tape on rewind. Eventually, she came to a clearing, and in the middle stood a circle of stones. Ancient, worn smooth. Each one had symbols carved into it. Not letters, but twisted shapes that looked like they'd been scratched into existence by claws instead of hands. At the center of the stone circle was a well. It had no bucket, no rope, just a deep, perfect hole. A whisper slipped from it. Not sound, feeling. It curled up Lena's spine, a cold pressure behind her eyes, like something inside the well was trying to remember her. Then, softly, a voice drifted from the dark drink. She stepped back, heart pounding. The wind returned suddenly, rustling the leaves in a frenzy. The trees shuddered. The ground trembled beneath her feet. And then, without warning, the next photo in the trail slammed against her chest, as if thrown by invisible hands. She looked down. This one was different. It was old, faded, and not of her. It showed a little girl with dark hair, standing by the well. She held a stuffed rabbit in one hand and a glass jar in the other. Something was inside the jar. A tiny human hand, severed clean at the wrist. Behind her stood the house. Only it wasn't rotting. It was pristine, beautiful. Smoke drifted gently from its chimney. The windows glowed warm and golden. The girl's name was written on the back, Eliza Wither, 1903. Lena froze. Wither? She looked up at the forest canopy. For the first time, she realized these woods weren't random. They were named after the family. This entire place, Wither Lane, the house, the trees, it all traced back to them. The question was how far back, and why. A sudden rustle behind her made her spin. Something stood at the edge of the clearing. It wasn't a person. Not exactly. It was tall, over 7 feet, limbs impossibly long, its body covered in something like bark, but breathing. Where a face should have been was a mass of roots and hair, writhing like worms in the dark. In place of eyes, it had hollow gaps, and inside them burned 2 small pinpricks of red light. Lena didn't move. The thing raised one of its arms, and from its wrist, a drop of something black fell onto the earth. Where it landed, the ground hissed. The creature pointed at the well, then vanished. Not walked away. Just gone. Lena should have run. She should have fled back through the woods, screaming, gun drawn. But her body didn't obey. It moved toward the well. The whispering returned, clearer, now louder. You were the first. You will be the last. She looked over the edge. There was no bottom, only darkness, and deep in that darkness, eyes, not 2, hundreds, watching, and then voices. Screams, names. She heard Noah's voice. Lena, help me. Please. I'm cold. I'm so cold. Then her own voice. You left me here. You promised you wouldn't leave me again. The well pulsed. The stones around it vibrated, and the symbols began to glow, one by one, a dull, throbbing red. Behind her, the woods creaked. The photos were gone, replaced by handprints in the dirt, small, childlike, leading back the way she came. Lena turned and followed. But this time, the forest was moving too. Branches curved in her path. The trees shifted positions when she wasn't looking. The ground swelled and dipped, disorienting her. Her breath caught in her throat as she stumbled forward. Then she saw it, a cabin. Not the house. A different structure. Smaller. Simpler. Nestled between two trees that leaned protectively over its roof like worried parents. Smoke drifted from its chimney. Faint candlelight glowed inside. She crept closer. The front door was open, just slightly. She stepped inside. The cabin was warm, dusty but lived in. Someone had been here. Recently. A kettle sat on the stove, still steaming. A journal lay open on a table. She moved to it and read. March 3rd, I saw her again. The girl with no eyes. She watches from the trees. She's getting closer. I think the well calls to her. I think she belongs there, but she doesn't know it yet. March 5th. I found another photo. This time, I wasn't in it, but she was. And she was smiling. I don't think she's human anymore. March 7th. I heard Noah's voice. I think she's making me hear him. I need to leave before she finds me again. The final entry was scrawled shaky. March 8th. I looked in the mirror. I saw her face, not mine. She's in me now. God help me, I think she was always in me. The journal ended there. Lena's knees buckled. She sat in the dust, trying to breathe. She was not the first. She might not be Lennon anymore. On the far wall, a mirror hung crooked. The surface was warped, like oil on water. It rippled, and her reflection stepped out, not fully, just the arm, reaching, palm open. On it a fresh photo. She took it. It showed the cabin, but not now. Burning. Inside someone screamed, and outside, the forest watched. The photo shook in Lena's hand. Her fingers tightened around it, smudging the edges with sweat and dirt. She stared at the image, flames climbing the walls of the cabin, licking at the windows like starving tongues. The structure, the one she stood in now, was engulfed. The fire roared out of the picture, so vividly she could almost feel the heat on her face. But there was no smoke in the air, no flickering light, not yet. Then she heard it, the same scream from the photo, muffled, distant, but real, coming from below. She jolted, head whipping toward the floorboards. The sound was faint, like it was leaking up through the wood. Someone, was beneath the cabin, screaming, choked by heat and desperation. Noah, she called out, voice brittle. The reply was not his. A woman answered. A single word, hissed in furious why. It echoed like a bell struck underwater, and then silence, sudden and absolute. Lena stood slowly, every bone in her body aching, as if she'd aged decades in an hour. She looked around the cabin again, eyes scanning for anything she hadn't noticed. The walls bore scratch marks, long, deliberate ones, like someone had dragged metal claws across the wood in patterns, over and over, searching for a weak spot. And the mirror, still hanging, still rippling. She stepped toward it. Her reflection was waiting. It looked like her, moved like her. But there was something deeply wrong behind its eyes. A twitch in the corner of the mouth. A flicker of movement in the pupils like something was trying to peek through the glass. As she got closer, the reflection began to smile. Not wide, not insane, just a knowing smirk, like it was in on something she hadn't caught up to yet. Then the smile faded. The reflection raised one hand, placed it flat against the other side of the mirror. Its lips moved, but no sound came out. Lena mirrored it, placed her palm against the cold surface. Suddenly, the mirror pulled. Like a vacuum from the other side had latched onto her soul. She stumbled back, breaking contact, heart hammering. The mirror vibrated once and went still. But now there was a handprint on the glass. Not hers. It was smaller, delicate, the size of a child's. Behind her, the cabin groaned. She turned. A trapdoor had opened in the floor, wide and waiting. No hinges creaked. No wind had done it. It had opened itself. Lena stepped toward it, against every screaming instinct. A narrow wooden ladder led down into shadow. As she descended, the warmth of the cabin vanished, replaced by cold earth and wet stone. At the bottom was a tunnel. Low, tight, she crouched and crawled. It felt endless. The walls pressed in close. The only sound was her breathing and the faint drip of water somewhere in the dark. Then she heard it again. Footsteps. Not behind her, not ahead. Above. Something was in the cabin, walking slowly, deliberately. Heavy dragging steps. Pacing. Lena froze. Breath held. A single word floated down the tunnel like rot on a breeze. Found. You. She didn't scream. She couldn't. Her throat locked shut. She scrambled forward. The tunnel opened into a chamber. Cramped and round, with roots creeping down the walls like skeletal fingers. At its center sat a wooden chair, and in that chair someone. A body. No movement. A young woman, skin gray and cracked like old porcelain. Her mouth had been sewn shut, eyes gouged out and replaced with buttons. Black, glossy buttons, stitched right into the sockets with thread that shimmered faintly. But the worst part was her dress. It was the same dress Lena remembered from childhood photos. Her own dress, worn at age 8. A birthday gift from their mother. Tiny red flowers on faded yellow cotton. The corpse in the chair wore it perfectly. Lena stumbled back, bile rising in her throat. Whoever this was, it wasn't her, but it was. A version of her. Preserved. Displayed. Sacrificed. There were drawings on the floor. Hundreds of them. Stick figures, crude and frantic. A house. A tree. A girl falling into a hole. A creature made of shadows and thorns. And beneath the chair, scratched deep into the stone, a single message: she was here first. Then the corpse twitched. Its fingers moved. Head tilted up. Button eyes gleaming. The thread across its mouth unraveled slowly, and from between its lips came a voice, not a woman's, not a child's, a deep, distorted growl. We never left. Lena backed away, but the tunnel behind her was gone. Only stone now. Solid, unmoving. The chamber began to breathe. Not metaphorically. The walls pulsed. The roots writhed. A low hum filled the air like chanting far beneath the earth. Then she saw it. Behind the chair, a second mirror. Taller than the one in the cabin. Filthy, cracked, but glowing faintly. Lena didn't trust it, but it was her only way out. She approached it, heart a wildfire in her chest. The mirror flickered and showed her something else. Not her reflection, but her mother, standing in the kitchen of their childhood home, tears in her eyes, looking directly at the camera. Noah, if you're watching this, she's not your sister anymore. Then the image blinked, replaced with a shot of the forest. Trees swaying, a face forming between the trunks. Eliza Wither, not a little girl anymore. A woman now, grown but unnatural. Her limbs moved like puppets on strings. Her skin was white as milk and covered in cracks. Her mouth was stitched at the corners, pulled into a permanent grin. The mirror flashed again. Now Lena saw herself, smiling, standing in the woods, holding Noah by the hand. But Noah looked afraid. Don't trust her, he whispered. And the mirror shattered. Glass blew outward, slicing Lena's face. She dropped to her knees, blood running down her cheek. The chair behind her was empty. The corpse was gone, but a new sound filled the chamber. Children laughing. Far away, getting closer. She grabbed a shard of the mirror. Sharp, long enough to cut. She didn't know what waited in the woods, or how far the rot of the withers had spread. But one thing was clear now. This place had fed off others for generations, and now it wanted her. Lena stood, dripping blood, mirror shard in hand. Somewhere above, the cabin began to burn. The laughter followed her up through the tunnel. Not sweet, not innocent. This was the laughter of children who had seen too much. Kids who had stopped being children long ago. It echoed off the walls of the tunnel behind her, growing louder and more frantic with every second. High, pitched, fractured, like it was being played backward on a warped cassette tape. Lena climbed fast, hands slipping on the wet ladder rungs. Each breath came sharp and desperate. The wooden trapdoor above, once so silent in its invitation, now felt impossibly far away. Her limbs burned as she dragged herself upward. The laughter turned into whispers, many voices speaking at once, impossible to understand but impossible to ignore. They weren't whispering to her. They were whispering about her. She remembers now. She broke it. She let them out. She was supposed to forget. When Lena burst out into the cabin, it was no longer safe. The warmth was gone. The floor glowed red under her feet like coals beneath a paper-thin skin. Smoke curled up from the walls. The mirror on the wall, still cracked from before, was now bleeding, not metaphorically. Thick black ichor oozed from the breaks in the glass, running down the surface in slow, sticky globs, pooling on the wooden floor and hissing where it touched the light. And the voices were still there, now in her ears, now inside her. Lena clutched the mirror shard in her fist, tight enough to draw more blood. The pain helped, reminded her she was still here, still herself, for now. But the cabin was no longer her shelter. It was a trap that had closed around her. She turned toward the door, still open, and ran. Outside, the woods were different, dead. Where once had stood lush, twisted trees, now gnarled husks remained. Their bark peeled like skin in layers, revealing pulsing veins beneath. The sky above was no longer black, it was white. Bone white, bleached and sterile with no stars, no moon, just a terrible nothingness that hummed with pressure. Like the sky itself wanted to collapse and crush the ground beneath it. She ran anyway, deeper into the nightmare. Branches clawed at her arms and face, but she pushed forward. The laughter had faded, but not the feeling. She knew she was being watched. Not just followed, watched, studied, dissected in some way that went beyond eyes. Then, abruptly, the forest ended. She emerged into another clearing, but this one was no natural space. It was perfectly circular, trees ringed around it like a crown of thorns. In the center stood a single figure, small, still, a child, a girl, no older than 8, wearing a dirty white dress that barely reached her knees. Her hair hung in front of her face, matted with filth. In her hands, she held a doll, handmade, stitched with twine and bone. Lena didn't move. The girl didn't either. Then the child looked up, and Lena's breath stopped. It was Eliza Wither. Her face was impossibly pale, her mouth stitched with wire in an X across her lips. Her eyes were black, not the color black, blackness, an absence. They didn't shine, didn't reflect. They consumed. Eliza tilted her head to one side. The motion was slow, wrong, like her spine bent the wrong way. The doll twitched in her hand. Its head rolled on its neck as though it too were alive. Behind Eliza, the ground cracked. A long fissure opened in the center of the clearing, and from it roots erupted, twisting, writhing, thick with sap that looked too dark to be natural. They moved like tentacles, slithering across the forest floor. Lena took a step back, and the roots responded. They reached for her, fast. She turned to run, but they were already there. One wrapped around her ankle, yanking her to the ground. Another coiled around her wrist, wrenching her arm backward. She screamed, struggling, kicking, clawing at the dirt. The mirror shard dropped from her hand and vanished into the black soil. Eliza walked forward. Slow. Each step she took, the roots pulsed and tightened. When she reached Lena, she knelt beside her and placed the doll on Lena's chest. Then, without a sound, she pointed upward. Lena looked, and saw it, hanging in the air above the clearing. Dozens of feet up was a massive mirror, shattered, floating. Each shard spun in place like teeth in a gear. Inside each piece, Lena saw herself, but different every time. In one, she was crawling, sobbing blood. In another, she was laughing as flames consumed the cabin. In another still, she stood with Eliza, both smiling, surrounded by screaming children bound in chains of roots. And in the largest shard, at the very center, was Lena, sitting in the chair beneath the cabin, eyes buttoned, mouth sewn shut, waiting. The roots dragged her closer to the fissure. Voices filled her head again. All the mirrors are doors. You were made to open them. They've been waiting for you. The ground cracked wider. Heat rose from below, thick and sour. The smell of rot and old sorrow, and then a sound. Not from the earth, from the woods, a single click. The sound of a camera shutter. The roots froze. So did Eliza. Another click, then another. Flashes of light burst from the trees, rapid and rhythmic. Someone was taking photos. Lena blinked through the pane, straining to see. A figure stepped from the tree line, camera in hand. Noah, but he looked different. Gaunt, hollow-cheeked, his clothes torn and dirty, but his eyes, they were alive, sharp, defiant. He held up the camera again. Click, flash, the roots recoiled like they'd been struck. Eliza hissed, mouth stretching against her stitches. Click. Another photo. The clearing trembled. Noah, Lena gasped. Help. He didn't speak. Just ran forward, slashing at the roots with a long knife pulled from his coat. Each cut blood-black sap that sizzled on contact with the air. He reached her, dropped to his knees, sliced the tendrils around her wrists and ankles. She was free. They ran. Behind them, the clearing erupted in screams, not human. The ground buckled. Roots lashed at the air, but not fast enough. They didn't look back, through the forest, over broken roots and twisted paths, until finally they burst out into the open road. And just like that, the trees stopped. Behind them, the forest stood still, watching, waiting. Noah collapsed beside her, breath ragged. She looked at him. He looked back. And for the first time in a year, Lena saw something real. But before she could speak, he said quietly, "You shouldn't have come back for me." Then, with a trembling hand, he held out a photograph. In it, Lena stood beside Eliza, smiling, her hands wrapped around Noah's throat. Lena couldn't take her eyes off the image. There she was, smiling in that eerie, vacant way she'd come to fear, standing beside Eliza with her. Her small bone, white hand nestled comfortably in Lena's palm. But it was Lena's other hand that made her stomach churn. It was wrapped around Noah's neck, fingers clenched tightly, his face frozen in a mixture of betrayal and agony. The photograph shimmered in the dull moonlight, as if it pulsed with a life of its own. But that wasn't what terrified Lena most. What terrified her was that deep down, some part of her recognized the moment. The position, the grip, the hate, and for the briefest flicker of a second, she wasn't sure if it was a lie at all. "Noah," she whispered, voice thin, "that's not real." He didn't answer immediately. His breath came shallow, his eyes scanning her face, not for comfort, but for confirmation, for truth, for something only he would know. "I don't know what's real anymore," he muttered, "but I've seen what this place does. I've seen what it wants." She opened her mouth, but before words came out, the photo in her hands turned hot, scorching. She cried out and dropped it. The moment it hit the dirt, the image curled and blackened, like paper set ablaze without fire. In seconds, it was gone, reduced to ash that sank into the road. Lena stared down at the spot, her heart pounding. "You said they've been waiting for me," she said, her voice shaking. "Why? Why me? Why us?" Noah stood, wiping sweat and soot from his forehead. "I don't know. I thought it was just me at first. I thought I was the one who brought it all back. But I think..." He paused, eyes glassing over. "I think it's always been about you." She staggered back. "What are you talking about?" He looked at her then, not like a brother seeing his sister, but like someone piecing together a puzzle they were afraid to finish. "It wasn't just a house, Lena, or a forest. It's like it's a memory. And you're part of it. Not like a visitor, like a resident." She shook her head. "No. I didn't even know this place existed until you vanished. I came looking for you. That's all." Noah's voice dropped. "You were born here." The silence that followed felt unnatural, heavy, a pause in reality itself. "What?" Lena breathed. He nodded slowly. "You were a baby. Mom and Dad tried to erase it. Moved us away. Changed your birth records. You don't remember because they made you forget. But I do. Bits of it. Anyway. Screaming in the woods. A girl named Eliza. A house with too many mirrors. You were hers once. That's why the place called you back." "No." Lena backed away. "No, that's not possible." "It is," he said, stepping forward, voice low. "You feel it, don't you? The way the house knew your name. The way the mirrors move for you. You're not just being hunted, Lena. You're being reclaimed. A wind picked up around them, sudden and sharp, cold like a blade, slicing across their faces. The road behind them was gone. Trees had grown over it, fast, instant. One blink, and the forest had reached them again. "They know I told you," Noah whispered. "We have to go." Now. They ran. Branches snapped underfoot. Shadows leapt between the trees. Every time Lena looked over her shoulder, the woods had shifted. New paths, new trees, always just enough to make sure they never truly knew where they were. Then, voices. Children again. But this time they weren't laughing. They were crying, wailing, mourning. Lena and Noah burst through another clearing, panting and filthy. At the center of the open space stood a tree. Massive, dead, its bark split open and wide, yawning gashes like wounds that had never healed. And hanging from its branches, dozens of dolls, each one handmade, twine and bones, button eyes and sewn mouths. Just like the one Eliza had placed on Lena's chest. Noah stopped cold. "It's here." The root tree. The what? That's what they called it in the journal I found. The children's tree. The place where they were all taken. Where they were changed. Lena stepped closer. The dolls swayed in a wind that didn't touch anything else. Below the tree, in the soil, were small mounds, graves. Too many, each with a name scratched into a piece of wood barely holding together. She crouched. "Read the closest one." Eliza Wither. Her blood froze. "That's not possible," she whispered. Noah nodded grimly. "They bury the body. But the soul, they feed it to the house." Lena stood slowly, her eyes locked on the grave. Then what's walking around wearing her face? Something old. Something that needs her to stay alive. And now it needs you. "Why me?" Noah didn't answer. Because they both knew the answer. She had never left this place. Not really. A sudden rumble cracked through the ground. The tree groaned. The dolls spun violently, heads jerking like marionettes in a storm. Then, from behind them, singing. A lullaby, soft, broken. "Hush now, sleep tight, the mirror shows light. But blink too long and you'll wake up wrong." Lena's spine stiffened. She turned. The girl stood at the edge of the clearing. Eliza, her mouth still sewn. But she sang anyway. No lips moved. No air passed. Just the sound pouring from her like a broken music box. And her eyes, those black holes, locked on Lena. She raised one hand, and the dolls screamed. Not voices, not noise. Real screaming. From inside the dolls, from mouths that shouldn't move. Lena clutched her ears. Noah grabbed her arm. "Don't look at her." But it was too late. Eliza had stepped closer. And Lena saw something she wasn't supposed to see. Behind Eliza's eyes, a reflection. Not hers, her mother's, bound, gagged, eyes pleading, in a mirror, held captive, trapped in glass. "Eliza has them," Lena gasped. "She has Mom. She's keeping them." Noah's face turned to ash. That's what it feeds on. Pieces of people, memories. Their reflections get stuck. They can't leave until someone breaks the cycle. The dolls cried louder. The lullaby twisted. "Rock now, sleep deep. The roots will keep, and when you wake you won't be you." Eliza reached into her chest. Not figuratively. Her fingers plunged through skin and bone like mist, and she pulled out a mirror. Small, oval, cracked. She threw it on the ground. It didn't shatter. It opened. A swirling, silver vortex inside. Lena felt it pulling again. Like gravity turned sideways. Like her blood was no longer loyal to her veins.
"Eliza!"
She screamed.
"Why me? What do you want?"
For the first time, the girl opened her mouth. The stitches split with a wet snap, and a voice older than the world came out. "To go home." Then the tree split in half. Roots burst from the earth, and Lena was swallowed by the mirror. There was no falling, no wind rushing past her ears, no descent. Just sudden weightlessness. Then the crushing weight of something not gravity pressing down from all directions. Lena's body convulsed as if the air had been sucked from her lungs and replaced with ice. There was no up, no down, only silver. Fluid, endless. It was like being trapped in the surface of a lake, just beneath the skin of the world, where everything was reflection and nothing was real. Then the world snapped into place. The pressure vanished, and she stood in a room. Not a forest, not the cabin. A room she hadn't seen in decades. Her childhood bedroom. Same posters. Same chip dresser. Same stuffed animals arranged on the crooked shelf. Dustless and smiling. But it wasn't right. The lighting was too dim, though no lamps were lit. The shadows too still. And the mirror above the vanity, cracked in a pattern she remembered inflicting herself at age 13 after an argument with her mother, was completely intact. Lena stepped toward the mirror, heart thudding. Her reflection stared back, no smirk, no delay. It mimicked her perfectly. That's what made her even more afraid. Something moved in the hallway beyond her door. She froze. Footsteps, soft, bare, dragging, and then whispers. Oh, she's back. She forgot. Oh, they won't let her go this time. Lena crept to the door and pulled it open a crack. The hallway was dark, lit only by flickering sconces bolted to warped walls. The wallpaper shifted like it was breathing. Red veins pulsing just beneath the paper's skin. A photo hung crooked on the far end. Her family, her real family. Mom, Dad, Noah, herself, smiling, all of them. But something watched from the corner of the frame. A shadow, too blurry to define, but there nonetheless, peeking around the edge of the image like it had always been there. A door creaked open at the end of the hall, then slammed shut. Lena stepped out. She walked the hallway, each footstep landing too softly, as though the floor had no substance. Her fingers brushed the walls as she passed. They pulsed, warm and slick. This wasn't a memory. It was a trap disguised as one, and she was walking right through it. The hallway twisted. Literally. A corner that should have led to the kitchen now sloped downward, bending like melted wax into a spiraling staircase that shouldn't have existed in her childhood home. She descended, the temperature dropping with every step. The air became thick, soupy with the smell of mold and metal. When she reached the bottom, she found herself in a long hallway of mirrors, tall, endless, set into the walls like teeth in a mouth. Each mirror showed something different. In one, she saw herself as a child, staring wide-eyed out the window of the family car, her hands pressed against the glass as the woods of Wither Lane sped by outside. In another, she stood beside her mother at a gravesite, but there was no headstone, just a hole, and her mother was whispering something. You were supposed to stay buried. Lena recoiled. The mirrors blurred, twitched, began to flicker like faulty screens. One showed Eliza walking in reverse through the forest. Another showed Noah screaming in a padded room, pounding on the walls with bloodied fists. Then one caught her eye. It was different, clearer. She stepped toward it. Inside, she saw the cabin. Noah knelt by the root tree, cradling something in his arms. A photo. He wasn't alone. The dolls had come down from the branches. Now they surrounded him, crawling, dragging their limp forms across the dirt, their button eyes locked onto him. And in the mirror image, he was calling her name. Lena, you're still in it.
Wake up! Wake up!
She pounded on the glass.
No! I'm here!
The mirror cracked. Not from her fist, from the inside. A hand reached out, pale, child-sized. It touched the inside of the mirror, palm took glass, right over Lena's reflection. And then the entire mirror wall rippled. All the images sensed. All showed the same thing. Lena, eyes black, mouth soon, smiling. Lena staggered back. The hallway behind her had disappeared. All exits were gone. She was surrounded. She turned in circles, breath rapid and shallow. The mirrors began to chant. Her voice, hundreds of versions of it, all in unison. She let them in. She let them out. She was born here. She was never supposed to leave. A crack split the floor beneath her. A wind howled up from below. And then, a scream, not hers, her mother's. It ripped through the mirrors, shattering several at once. From the broken glass, darkness poured, liquid and thick, sloshing out and congealing into forms, one after another children, dozens, maybe hundreds, eyes missing, mouths stitched, hands reaching for her, and behind them the house, the real one, no illusion, No memory, just a place of rot and hunger. It loomed in the black, doors wide, windows lit from within by pulsing orange light that flickered like a heartbeat. She was no longer in a hallway. She was in front of it again, back at the start. The forest stretched out behind her, but not the living forest, the dead one. Trees like blackened bone, ash falling from the sky like snow, and on the porch stood Eliza, still, watching. The mirror she'd been pulled through, now embedded in her chest. Glowing, Eliza opened her mouth. No stitches this time, just a void. From it came a sound that didn't belong in this world. A sound that cracked the dirt. That made Lina's nose bleed. That made her memories shake loose from her skull. She fell to her knees, clutching her head as images flooded her mind. Her mother screaming as she was dragged from the house. Her father, burning photos in the backyard, whispering prayers between sobs. A priest warning, if she ever remembers, it will start again. And most terrifying of all, Lena as a child, standing in front of the mirror, smiling at herself, and then stepping through it, not pulled, not forced, she chose it. And on the other side, Eliza had waited. Lena's mouth opened, but she didn't scream, she laughed. Something inside her cracked, and her own voice whispered. Low and sweet, they didn't bury me deep enough. She stood. The children stopped reaching, they waited. Eliza stepped aside, and Lena walked through the door of the house, this time on her own. Inside, the mirrors greeted her. Inside, the voices whispered her true name. Inside, the house smiled, because the prodigal daughter had finally come home. The door didn't creak as it closed behind Lena. It sighed, a long, weary breath, as though the house itself was relieved. The moment she stepped over the threshold, the light changed. It wasn't sunlight or candlelight or even electric. It was the dull glow of memory, sepia and fading. Like old film stock left too long in the projector, shadows moved ahead of her, shifting along the floor like they were retreating to make room for her return. This was no longer about survival. It was recognition. The hallway was impossibly long now, lined with frames that pulsed faintly as she passed. Not photos, moments. Live, flickering fragments suspended in glass. Her as a child chasing a shadow down this very corridor. Her mother dragging her screaming from the front steps, her father hammering someone, into the basement walls. Each step pulled another thread loose in her mind. Not new memories. Old ones, untethered at last. She reached the living room. It was cleaner now. No dust, no decay. The furniture had been restored to its original shapes. Plush, burgundy chairs, a grandfather clock with its pendulum still, and a piano tucked in the corner, beneath a spiderweb of roots that pulsed like veins. And at the center of the room, where no furniture should be, stood the mirror, the same one from the cabin, the same one from her childhood bedroom, now mounted tall and proud like a shrine. The glass had healed, but inside it was not her reflection. Inside it was her, but older, taller, her hair longer, eyes darker. A version of herself that hadn't left this place, that had grown here like ivy. She stood in a red dress Lena had never worn, barefoot, hands clean. The expression she wore was unreadable, part sorrow, part joy, and something colder. The Lena inside the mirror raised a hand, so did the real one, but not at the same time. The timing was just off enough to make her skin crawl. A low creak echoed from the upstairs landing. Lena turned her head slowly. Someone stood there. Noah, or at least something that wore him. His skin was pale, stretched tight over his bones, as if dried from within. His eyes were sunk so deep they looked like voids. But his mouth smiled. "Welcome home," he said. The voice was his, but coated in something thicker, something layered. Dozens of voices underneath it, harmonizing in the throat of someone she once loved. "I saw you burn," Lena said, her own voice trembling with a strange mix of fear and familiarity. "I did," the thing said, taking a step down the stairs. "But we're past that now. There's nothing left to destroy, only to remember." Lena backed away, her heel brushing against the edge of the rug she used to sit on as a girl. She used to color here, her crayons now replaced by scratches in the floorboards, names etched by fingernails. The room felt like it was leaning in, curving around her like a ribcage closing. "What are you?" she whispered. "Noah." It reached the bottom of the stairs. "I'm the version of him that stayed, the echo that learned how not to die. The memory of a brother preserved." He touched the wall beside him. The wood rippled. "But you're different," he said, circling her. "You were never just a visitor. You belonged. Even before you knew what that meant." "I don't belong here," Lena snapped. "I never did." The walls groaned. The mirrors pulsed. Even the air disagreed. He laughed gently. "You were born inside a reflection, Lena. Don't you remember? Your mother begged them not to take you. But she looked in the mirror too long, and you saw her." He leaned close. "And so did Eliza." The house shuddered. From upstairs, the sound of children laughing rose again, thin and shrill, like glass being dragged across stone. Lena turned back toward the mirror. Her reflection had changed again. This version was smiling. Too wide. Its eyes turned black, and in its hand it held a key. She didn't remember hiding any key, but the moment she looked at it, she knew it opened the room that had always been locked. The door in the basement. The one her father warned her about. Her feet moved before she could stop them. Noah, or the thing that wore him, didn't follow. He simply watched. "You'll need to choose," he said. "Choose what? To be forgotten or remembered?" She didn't ask what he meant. She knew. The basement door was open now. The stairs yawned down into black. No handrail, no lights, just the smell of damp soil and rusted metal. She descended. Each step seemed to take longer than the one before. Gravity bent strangely, pulling her sideways instead of down. Her vision narrowed. When she reached the bottom, she found herself in a room she had seen before, but only in dreams, in nightmares where she couldn't wake. Stone walls, a circle drawn in ash, a chair in the center, strapped with belts still sticky with age, and a mirror on every wall. Each one showed a version of her family. Each one different. One with no eyes. One where their mouths had been replaced with keys. One where they screamed silently, forever frozen in that act. She stepped into the circle. The mirrors flickered. And behind her, a voice whispered, "Say your name." She turned. Eliza stood there. Not the child, the true Eliza. Her face peeled back into a smile that was just skin. No emotion, no warmth. "Say it," Eliza repeated. Lena's mouth opened. But what came out wasn't the name she'd always known. It was something older, something wet, something wrong. The mirrors responded instantly. They cracked, not shattered, breathed. The glass pulsed like lungs, inhaling deeply. One by one, the images within the mirrors reached out, dozens of hands, all hers grabbing, pulling, tearing, trying to take her back inside. But she didn't run. She raised her hands and spoke again, this time with intention, with memory, with ownership. "I am the one you buried." The hands stopped. The mirrors froze. Even Eliza blinked, just once. Lena reached forward, touched the mirror with her own reflection. The moment her palm hit the glass, the floor gave out, and she fell into herself. The house vanished. The children screamed. The mirrors shattered. And Lena opened her eyes, alone, in the middle of Wither Lane. At sunrise, the house gone. No gone. The road silent. A single mirror shard in her hand, and inside it, her reflection smiled. The mirror shard in Lena's palm was warm. Not in the way glass should be after resting in the cold dirt all night, but warm like breath, like blood. It pulsed gently against her skin, a quiet rhythm that matched her heartbeat exactly. She tried to drop it, but her fingers wouldn't uncurl. It clung to her as though the glass had grown roots through her nerves. She was alone on Wither Lane. The road was still. No trees, no wind, no sound. Only the scorched outline in the soil where the house had stood, marked by a ring of ash and a few twisted nails poking up from the earth like broken teeth. The sun had risen just high enough to burn away the fog. Yet nothing around her seemed touched by daylight. It was morning, and yet it wasn't. She staggered to her feet. Every joint ached like she'd been nailed to the ground overnight and torn loose only moments before. Her breath steamed in the air even though the day was warm. She looked down at the shard again. Her reflection hadn't moved, but it hadn't stopped smiling either. "Where's Noah?" she whispered to no one, the words trembling on her lips. "Where's the house? The forest? Where did they all go?" A low hum answered. Not from the sky, not from the ground, from inside her. The same hum she'd heard in the mirror room, when the walls pulsed like lungs and the air bent around her name. It was faint now, barely more than an echo, but it lived beneath her skin, like something inside had come back with her. She pocketed the shard, for now. The trees that had once loomed over Wither Lane were gone, replaced with nothing but open space. And yet, Lena had the sickening feeling they hadn't disappeared. They had withdrawn, waiting, watching, repositioning themselves just outside the veil of visibility. The road stretched on for what felt like miles, though she knew the drive from town to the house was barely a few hundred feet. She started walking. It wasn't until she passed the first familiar landmark, a rusted, out mailbox swallowed by ivy, that she realized the town itself had changed. Dern Hollow wasn't where she left it. The gas station that had once stood at the intersection was now a blackened husk. Windows smashed. Shelves collapsed. Signs dangling half, burned by some fire that no one seemed to remember. A layer of ash coated everything, though no smoke lingered in the air. She stepped inside. The bell above the door didn't chime. Behind the counter, the register had melted into a pool of warped plastic and metal. A single Polaroid lay on top of it. She picked it up. Her stomach flipped. It was her, standing behind the counter, smiling at a customer who had no face. Just a smooth stretch of skin where features should have been. Her name tag read Eliza. The picture had a date in the corner, June 26, 1998. Lena hadn't even been born yet. She tore the photo in half. The lights above her flickered once, then again, and in the static, a voice. Low, mechanical. "You can't erase what you never remembered." She turned and ran, out the door, across the street, toward the town square. But the more she moved, the more wrong everything became. Every building was empty. Every window covered from the inside with newspaper, or something like it. Some had symbols scrawled across them in a dark, glistening ink she instinctively knew not to touch. Others bore handprints, tiny, overlapping, frantic. She paused at one, pressed her ear to the glass, and heard children singing on the other side. She backed away quickly. A movement caught her eye. Down the alley between the bakery and what used to be the library, a figure. Tall, unmoving. It stood in perfect stillness, draped in shadows that refused to be burned away by sunlight. No features, no face. Only the outline of a long coat and arms that hung too low at its sides. It tilted its head slowly, like it recognized her. Lena ran again. Every step she took, the road beneath her felt softer. Not pavement anymore, but something closer to skin. It gave a little under her shoes, as if breathing beneath the soles. She didn't stop until she reached the church, or what was left of it. The steeple had collapsed inward. The bell tower was silent, and the stained glass had been replaced by black mirrors, each one fogged from the inside. She pushed the heavy doors open. The sanctuary was cold and dripping. Candles lined the pews, all burning at once, though no one had lit them. And at the altar stood her mother. Lena froze. "Mom." Her mother turned. She looked exactly as she had the day she disappeared, blank-eyed, pale. Lips trembling like they wanted to speak but couldn't remember how. Her hands clutched a Bible, but its pages were blank, fluttering wildly as if in a wind that didn't exist. "You found your way back," she said, voice flat. "Just like they said you would." Lena stepped forward. "What happened? Where is Noah? Where have you been?" Her mother smiled, and Lena's blood went cold. Because it wasn't her mother's smile. It was hers. The same two wide, knowing grin she'd seen in every mirror. "You're not her," Lena whispered. The thing nodded. "No. But I remember her. And so do you." The candles went out all at once. Darkness swallowed the sanctuary. Lena turned to run, but the doors were gone. The pews had vanished. Only the altar remained, now surrounded by mirrors. And in every one, Lena, 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 over and over. All the versions, all the wrong ones. One crying, one covered in ash, one smiling with blood in her teeth, one holding Eliz's hand. And in the center mirror, no reflection, only the empty chair. The one in the basement, waiting. "I'm not going back," Lena said, her voice cracking. The mirror rippled. "You never left." The mirrors shattered, all at once. Glass rained down like frozen raindrops, embedding in her arms, her cheeks, her back. She dropped to the ground, curling into herself, and from the broken mirror came a figure. Not Eliza herself. The version that had never escaped. The version that wanted to stay. It crouched beside her, put a hand on her shoulder, and whispered, with warmth and finality, "Stop running. This is the only place you were ever real." And then it leaned in close and kissed her forehead. Lena gasped. The world tilted, and when she opened her eyes again, she was behind the counter of the gas station, name tag on, the bell over the door chiming. A customer walked in, face smooth, no eyes, and she smiled at him, like she'd done this 1,000 times before, because she had. Because this wasn't the end. This was just one version, and the others were waiting. The bell above the door chimed again, and Lena smiled. She didn't want to. Every nerve inside her screamed to stop, but the muscles pulled on their own, stretching her lips into a grin that didn't quite reach her eyes. The man who stepped inside the gas station had no face, just skin stretched smooth where eyes and a mouth should have been. But he moved with intention, as if he knew exactly where everything was. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He was part of it, just like she was now. Behind her, the radio crackled to life. Static at first, then a familiar voice, not from memory, but from deeper than that. From the same black marrow that whispered to her in the mirrors. "Station 17. Weather is gray again. Slight chance of ash. Don't forget to smile." She turned automatically, scanning the shelves, checking inventory, noting what had been taken, what had been replenished. Her hands moved with muscle memory she didn't remember learning. On the counter sat a stack of Polaroids. Fresh ones. The top photo showed her smiling at a customer who hadn't yet walked in. The timestamp read 10 minutes from now. Under it, a caption say nothing. The second photo was worse. She stood outside the gas station, arms outstretched, staring up into a blank sky, and behind her, Eliza Wither, still a child, still too pale, held a mirror like a lantern, its surface swirling with lightless color. Lena's face in that image wasn't human anymore. She looked like something becoming. A low tone echoed through the walls. Not a bell, not quite a siren either. A frequency that buzzed behind her eyes and brought a single thought with it: leave now, and you'll be erased. But the moment passed. The door opened again. Same bell. Another faceless customer. And again, her hands moved on their own, scanning, folding, smiling. This time, though, something changed. As the customer left, Lena glanced at the glass door and caught her reflection. It blinked. She hadn't. Her smile faded for a fraction of a second, then returned. And that moment, so small, so brief, opened a crack. She turned to the mirror mounted behind the cigarette display. The glass looked normal. Smudged, slightly tilted, warped by heat. But when she stepped closer, the image in it shifted. Not her reflection anymore. A room. Familiar. The basement. The chair. Empty. Waiting. And on the floor, a mirror shard. Hers still pulsing with faint, wet light. Her hand twitched. The memory of its warmth came back to her fingertips. Like a shock. That's when she heard the knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps from the storage room behind her. She turned. Nothing should be back there. Not unless someone had come in through the back lot, which didn't exist anymore. She stepped around the counter and opened the door. Darkness. The room behind the door wasn't the storage area. It was the hallway again. The endless hallway of mirrors. The same one from the mirror world. But it wasn't just a memory. It was now, and standing at the end of the hall, barely visible in the gloom, was a woman. Lena squinted. It wasn't Eliza. It was her mother. Real this time. Lena knew the difference now. The woman didn't move. She stood barefoot in a hospital gown, dried blood down the front, eyes hollow but alive. Then she spoke. Choose again, Lena. And the hallway collapsed. Glass shrieked. Wind roared. Lena stumbled backward, falling through the door and landing back in the gas station. Except it wasn't the same anymore. The walls were cracking. The aisles had twisted sideways, and the customer still standing in front of the counter now had a mouth. Just a mouth. No eyes. No ears. No nose. Just a wide, gaping grin that opened slowly wider, wider, until it tore into the sides of his neck. A voice hissed from the wound, "You were supposed to stay forgotten." Lena ran. Through the back door, where there had never been a back door before, and into a corridor lined with pictures. Not mirrors. Photographs. All of her. Hundreds. Some recent, some old. In some, she was a child playing in a yard she didn't remember. In others, she was older, crying in an alley. Others still showed her behind the counter, looping endlessly. In one, she was asleep in the chair in the basement. Smiling. She passed another photo. Stopped. It showed her mother, holding a baby, but the baby's face had been burned out of the image. Just black char around where the features should be. Behind them, through a window, Eliza watched. The hallway twisted. A door slammed open ahead of her, and she stepped into a church. Not the ruined one from before, a new one. Clean, glowing. And at the pulpit stood her father, alive, preaching to dolls. Hundreds of them, dressed in children's clothes, all seated in pews, heads tilted up in silent reverence. He spoke in tongues. Words Lena didn't understand, but somehow still felt. And then he stopped mid-sentence. Looked up. "Welcome back, sweetheart," he said. "We've been keeping your seat warm." Lena turned to run, but the doors were gone again. Behind her, the dolls turned in unison. Their button eyes gleamed. "You can't escape through running," her father said. "You have to remember your part, your place." A choir began to sing. Children's voices, all saying her name, over and over. Each time, different. Each time, wrong. Lena dropped to her knees, hands pressed to her ears, but the sound was inside her now, drumming behind her ribs, pounding in her teeth, until a scream ripped through the chapel, her own. Not from now, from the chair, from the memory, from the version of her that still sat trapped beneath the house, in the dark, behind the mirrors. The church cracked. Light poured in through the roof like blood from a wound. And Lena saw it, a spiral of mirror shards circling above her, each showing a version of herself. Each one trapped, screaming, drowning, burning, smiling. She had to break the pattern. She stood, reached into her pocket. The shard was still there, pulsing. She looked into it and saw Eliza, waiting, smiling. "No more," Lena said. She raised the shard and drove it into her own hand. Pain exploded. Blood spattered across the floor. But the mirrors screamed. Not shattered, reacted. Each one twisted, convulsing, warping into jagged tunnels of light. And through one, she saw the house again, the real one, collapsed, ruined, gone. And Noah, alive, walking away. She reached for him, and the light swallowed her whole. When her vision cleared, she stood at the edge of Wither Lane. No house, no forest, only open sky, and Noah beside her, staring ahead. "Did you see it?" he asked, without turning. She looked at her palm. The mirror shard was gone. Only a scar remained. But her reflection still smiled in the puddle at her feet. "I saw everything," she said, but the sky behind them had already started to turn black. The sky didn't darken like dusk. It curdled. Like milk left too long in the heat, it thickened in slow, ugly swirls of gray and purple, streaks of red blooming outward like bruises in reverse. Clouds twisted overhead, writhing like worms in an open wound. No wind blew. No birds flew. The silence above Wither Lane became something louder than sound. It pressed on Lena's ears, humming beneath her skin. A silence that suggested the world had stopped, not time, not space, but reality itself. Pausing to ask whether she should be allowed to continue, Noah stood beside her, unmoving. His eyes were locked on the sky, pupils dilated, jaw slack. He looked hollow. Not afraid, not calm. Just detached, like a person watching a memory replay on a screen they couldn't stop. Lena touched his arm. Noah, he blinked, slow. Too slow. His voice was brittle when he finally spoke. It's happening again. What is? He turned to her then, and for a split second, she saw it. His shadow. It didn't match him. It flickered, delayed, like it was still catching up from a place he'd just escaped. I saw the sky turn like this once, he said, voice a whisper beneath thunder that hadn't started yet. The night we left the house, I was 5. You were just a baby. He pointed toward the horizon, and Lena saw it too. The forest was returning, not regrowing, returning, as though it had never been burned or broken. Trees rose silently from the earth, bark twisting like it was being peeled upward from beneath the surface. Branches formed like bone knitting itself back together. Shadows slithered between the trunks. And deeper still, far off but coming closer, was the shape of the house, whole again, unburned, unbroken, waiting. No, Lena breathed. We destroyed it. Noah didn't look away. You never destroy it. You just leave it unattended. And when you stop watching, it builds itself again, she finished. The road beneath them cracked. Hairline fractures snaked across the pavement like veins in marble. Black ichor seeped upward from the fissures. Slow, sticky, alive. Lena stepped back. The ground pulsed. And then something climbed out. Not fast. Not sudden. Like it was rising because it had always been just beneath the surface, waiting for the invitation to return. The thing that emerged wasn't human. It wore a dress. Pale yellow, stained and torn. It had arms. It had legs. But its face was a blur, constantly shifting, like someone flipping through a deck of photos too quickly to focus. Child, woman, shadow, mirror. Each face bled into the next, never settling. Eliza, or what remained of her. She stepped forward and the cracks spread further. Lena, Noah whispered, backing up, don't talk to it. But Eliza's voice was already inside Lena's head. Not words. Images. A cradle in the attic. A nursery without windows. A mobile made of teeth spinning above a bed. Her own mother sobbing behind a door that wouldn't open. Whispering prayers in reverse. Lena staggered, clutching her temples. Stop it. But Eliza only smiled, and then she spoke. Would you like to see what it looks like when you never left? The ground split beneath Lena's feet. She fell. Not into darkness, but into light. Blinding, endless, merciless light. And in that light, she stood in a house she didn't recognize, but somehow knew. Clean white walls. Wooden floors. A scent like lemon polish and rot. A mirror at the end of the hallway. Her footsteps echoed as she moved toward it. She saw herself in the glass, except it wasn't the version she'd known. Not the survivor, not the wanderer. This Lena had stayed. She lived here. She had never escaped Wither Lane. Her eyes were dead. Her smile was permanent. She had become domestic, a relic. Behind her, a crib. Inside, a child made of roots and ash, gurgling happily. Eliza stood nearby, brushing the child's hair with a comb made of fingernails. And Lena's reflection nodded at her like a twin who had waited too long. Welcome home, the mirror, Lena said. You've been tired for so long. Lena stumbled back from the glass, but there was no floor. She fell again. And this time, landed back in the ash ring where the house had once burned. Noah was gone. The sky had turned completely black now. No clouds, no stars, just that velvet nothingness that swallowed even the idea of light. Eliza stood beside her, still shifting, still flickering, and in her hands was something small and sharp, the mirror shard, the same one Lena had buried in her own palm. It dripped with red. She held it out, Take it, Eliza said. Lena didn't move. If I do, she whispered, I don't come back, do I? Eliza smiled wider. There is no back, only through. The ground rumbled, the air twisted, and far in the distance, the house's lights flickered on, one window at a time, each one glowing with soft, golden warmth, each one containing a version of her, cooking, crying, screaming, bleeding, smiling. Why me? Lena asked. Eliza stepped closer. Because you were born remembering. Because you can't forget what's never been told. Because the mirror never reflects just what you are. It shows what you almost became. A hand touched Lena's shoulder. She spun. Noah, but different. A version of him that looked too clean, too well fed. He wore the same smile as her reflections. You'll feel better, he said. Once you give in. Lena looked down at her palm. The scar was gone, and in its place, something was moving beneath the skin. Glass. Growing. She dropped to her knees, shaking. Everything had been built for this. The house, the dolls, the basement. Not to trap her, but to shape her. Eliza stepped forward and placed the shard at Lena's feet. You're not the first, she said gently, but you'll be the last to choose. The ground began to open again. The mirror beneath her chest glowed from within her body. The voices returned. Children, mothers, fathers, all speaking as one decide. Lena picked up the shard. Her reflection stared up at her from its curved surface. And for the first time, she didn't smile. She lifted it, raised it to her throat, and whispered no. The shard shattered in her hand, and the world convulsed. The sky screamed. The house exploded inward, collapsing into itself like paper burned too fast to catch. And Lena woke up, gasping, in the middle of the forest, covered in ash. No house, no Noah, no Eliza. Only the trees, silent, still, and a single voice barely audible riding the wind. You broke it, but it remembers. Lena lay on her back in the dirt, gasping like she'd surfaced from deep water, lungs rattling, ribs sore. The sky above was no longer black. It was soft gray now, overcast and blank, the kind of sky that made time feel stalled. She reached up instinctively, searching her throat for blood, for glass, for any proof of what she'd almost done, but there was nothing. No wound, no shard. Just the faint imprint of where the mirror piece had pulsed against her skin, like a warning, like a seal she'd somehow broken. The forest around her was unfamiliar. Not in the way a strange place is unfamiliar, but in the way a forgotten place feels. Everything was quiet. No wind, no birds, not even the mechanical chirp of distant insects. It was like the world had been placed on mute just for her return. She sat up slowly, body aching like she'd been through fire, dragged through ice, and slammed into the ground by something that didn't need hands. Her clothes were torn, stained with ash and something darker. But more than anything, she felt hollow, as if part of her had been carved out and left behind. Noah was gone, but she didn't believe he was dead. She couldn't. Whatever this place was, whatever hell she had been dragged through, he had been part of it, woven in deeper than even she'd realized. He knew things. Too much. And now, without him, she felt like a puppet missing half its strings, free but limp. The forest floor was thick with roots, not tree roots, but something else. They glistened faintly, too symmetrical, too smooth, like they had been grown with intent. Each one curled in the direction of a trail that hadn't been there before. A narrow path, barely wide enough for a person, winding between the trees like a scar. She stood wobbling and began to walk. Each step forward felt like it was being watched. Not by eyes, but by memory. The very soil seemed to remember who she was, remembered the weight of her presence. Somewhere in this earth, her childhood had soaked in like rainwater, seeped deep and grown roots of its own. She didn't recognize the trees. They were tall, nearly skeletal. The kind that seemed older than time and far too tall for their own good. Their branches stretched toward one another above her like a canopy of skeletal fingers, blotting out what little sky remained. As she moved, The world began to shift. She didn't notice it at first, just the faint shimmer on the edges of things. A glint that shouldn't be there, a reflection where no mirror existed, and then, as she turned a bend, she saw the first one, a mirror, freestanding. Tall, rectangular, framed in black, leaning slightly against a tree trunk. Its surface shimmered like water, but clearer. The glass didn't show her reflection. It showed a room, her childhood kitchen. She stepped closer, breath catching. Her mother stood at the sink, washing dishes, humming a soft, tuneless melody. Her back was turned. Lena reached for the mirror instinctively, her fingers grazing the cold glass, and her mother paused, then turned. Her eyes were hollow. Black, she opened her mouth, and instead of words, a voice not her own spilled out, "Did you think the forest forgot you?" Lena staggered back. The mirror's surface rippled and went dark. More mirrors lined the path now, dozens. Each one a memory she hadn't consented to relive. Her first nightmare. The basement door creaking open on its own. A tiny Eliza standing in the hallway with a cracked doll in one hand and a butcher knife in the other. Lena as a toddler, staring into a mirror and laughing, while her reflection didn't. She walked faster. The forest thickened, and the mirrors changed. No longer memories. Now, possibilities. One showed her lying in a hospital bed, wrists bound, eyes staring blankly at a ceiling fan spinning too fast. Another showed her as an old woman, alone in a house that hummed at night with voices only she could hear. Another, she was smiling, surrounded by a family that looked perfect, until they turned to face her and all wore her face. She pushed forward, refusing to look at any more, but one stopped her cold. It wasn't a mirror like the others. It was a window, and through it, she saw Noah, alive, in a room she didn't recognize. Stone walls, candlelight. He was sitting in the chair, but it wasn't the same room beneath the house. This was deeper, older. Something in the stone behind him was moving, shadows, coiling and slipping like they were inside the rock, waiting for cracks. Noah looked up, met her eyes. "Lena," he mouthed, then he screamed. No sound, just his mouth wide open, throat straining, veins bulging. She reached for the mirror. It stayed solid. He slammed his fists on the arms of the chair. Mouth still open. Expression twisted with rage and fear and something she couldn't name. Then, a voice behind her. "You left him." She turned. Eliza stood again, but taller now. Older. Her limbs were long and angular, like a shadow stretched too far. Her skin pale to the point of transparency. Veins visible beneath the surface. Her eyes were mirrors themselves now, shining, unreadable, reflecting only Lena. "I didn't leave him," Lena said through gritted teeth. "I broke your world. I refused you." Eliza didn't blink. "You refused a lie, not the truth. I destroyed your house." Eliza smiled, teeth too many for one mouth, and it was rebuilt. Lena backed away, hands shaking. "I won't be what you want. You already are." Eliza whispered. "You always were. You opened the first door. You walked through the first mirror. You were never taken. You were chosen." The mirrors behind them began to hum. A low, trembling vibration that grew louder with each breath Lena took. Eliza stepped closer. "Do you want to save your brother?" Lena froze. Eliza's voice dipped. "Then wake up." Lena blinked. Suddenly, she was back in the chair. The basement. Straps tightening. Mirrors on every wall. Noah and the one across from her, still screaming. Eliza behind her, placing a shard against her temple. "Choose again," Eliza whispered. And then, static, like something was tuning in. 100 versions of Lena flickering like broken film. Some begging, some laughing, some gone entirely. And her voice, all of them, spoke at once. "You're the key that forgot what it opened." Lena screamed. The glass shattered inward, and she fell through herself again, waking up in a motel, somewhere off Route 17, clean sheets, morning sunlight, birds chirping, a mirror on the wall, and on the bedside table, a single Polaroid, her and Noah, smiling, outside a house that didn't exist anymore. And scribbled on the back, in Noah's handwriting, "If you remember this, It's already starting again. The motel room was too quiet. That heavy kind of silence that didn't just blanket the space. It pressed on your chest, like someone standing just off frame, watching without breathing. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, the coarse motel comforter crinkling beneath her. The Polaroid trembled between her fingers. She stared at it like it might start bleeding. The edges were curled, the image crisp, impossibly clear. She and Noah, side by side, arms slung around each other, grinning beneath a bright blue sky in front of a house that should never have existed again. But the colors were off. The grass too green. The sky too rich. Their smiles too perfect. She flipped the photo again. If you remember this, it's already starting again. She'd read it 5 times now. Her thumb hovered over the scrawl, not wanting to smudge it. Something about Noah's handwriting, his unmistakable jagged rhythm, made her sick with dread. It was rushed. Panicked. Not written in peace. Not meant to be poetic. A warning. Lena looked around the room. Cheap pine furniture. Peeling beige wallpaper. A TV bolted to the dresser. Everything still. Harmless. And yet wrong. The mirror over the dresser didn't show her. Not at first. For a full 3 seconds after she turned to it, the glass remained blank. Then her reflection faded in, like an actor late for their cue. And her reflection didn't match. She blinked. Her reflection didn't. It stood perfectly still, head tilted slightly, a faint smile creeping across its lips. Lena stood slowly, approached. Her own face stared back, lips slowly curling, eyes darkening. Behind her in the mirror, a figure. Tall, motionless, blurred. She spun around. Nothing. Back to the mirror. Gone. She backed away, breathing fast. Heartbeat hammering in her throat. The air in the room had changed. It smelled, faintly but unmistakably, of burning wood and something sweeter, like rotting fruit left too long in the sun. Then came the knock. 1, 2, 3, at the door. She didn't move. The knock came again, louder. Lena stepped forward, hesitating only long enough to grab the Polaroid. The door handle began to turn on its own. Slow, deliberate, she lunged for it, pressing her weight against the wood, holding it shut with her shoulder. "Who is it?" she demanded. A pause. Then a voice, soft. "You left something behind, feminine, young, Eliza." Lena felt bile rise in her throat. "I'm not opening it," she hissed. "You already did," Eliza answered. And the voice came not from the hallway, but from inside the room. Lena turned slowly. Eliza stood in the far corner, barefoot, dress stained with ash. Hair matted down the side of her face. But it wasn't her eyes that terrified Lena. It was her smile. It looked sewn into her skin. Lips stretched too far, too tight, barely holding back what wreathed beneath. "You don't belong in this world anymore," Eliza said calmly. "You were reshaped, carved by mirror light." Lena stumbled back. "I broke it. I broke you." Eliza tilted her head. "Did you? Or did you just cut one thread and leave the loom running?" Behind her, the bathroom door creaked open. Lena turned in time to see herself walk out. The version from the mirror. Same clothes. Same face. But the smile, it didn't belong to her. The eyes, they were too still. It stepped forward in silence, and every mirror in the room began to hum. Lena grabbed the TV remote and hurled it into the wall. The mirror didn't break. The hum grew louder. Reflections now twisted. Versions of herself caught in various poses, screaming, weeping, smiling. Some clawing at the glass as if begging to be let out. The false Lena stepped closer and whispered, "You have to choose which one of you lives." Lena shook her head, voice trembling. "No, no more choices." Eliza stepped beside her, hand brushing Lena's shoulder. "Then they'll choose for you." The room pulsed. The lights flickered, and suddenly Lena was back in the house. Same hallway, same flickering frames. Only this time, the frames weren't memories. They were windows. And beyond each one was someone she loved. Her mother, her father, Noah, childhood friends. People who had vanished without reason. Every one of them stood in their own window, tapping on the glass, mouths moving silently, begging. Trapped. She ran down the hall, screaming Noah's name. He appeared at the end, flickering like bad tape, eyes wide, hands pressed against his window.
Lena! Listen to me!
Don't believe her. Eliza's voice curled through the air behind her. He's only a reflection now. He's just like you. Lena turned, and for a moment she saw every version of herself stacked behind Eliza. Hundreds of them, some alive, some dead, some still screaming. But one, only one, stood still, watching, not begging, not weeping, just waiting. Lena stepped toward her. The other versions faded away. This one, she looked real, tired, bruised, but real. She didn't smile, she didn't speak. She simply held out her hand. And in it, a knife, old, rusted, familiar, the one from the basement. Lena reached out, took it, and as soon as her fingers wrapped around the hilt, the hallway exploded in light. She was back in the motel room. Eliza was gone. The reflection was gone. Just her now. Her and the knife. The Polaroid still sat on the bed. Only now the image had changed. It was Lena, alone, standing at the edge of Wither Lane, holding the knife. Behind her, the sky was gone, replaced by mirror glass, infinite. And written in blood across the bottom of the photo, break the right one. Lena clutched the knife, and the mirror on the wall whispered her name. The mirror whispered her name like it was tasting it, soft at first, barely a murmur, but growing syllable by syllable, until it felt like her name was echoing off the walls, off her skin, reverberating inside her skull. Lena, the voice wasn't hers. It wasn't Eliza's. It wasn't Noah's. It was all of them, layered into a single tone, each one trying to be louder than the next, each one begging for her attention. She gripped the knife tighter. Her palm slicked with sweat, or maybe blood. She couldn't tell anymore. The motel room felt like it had shrunk. The ceiling pressed downward like a lid on a box. The walls pulsed subtly, breathing in a way drywall should never breathe. Every light bulb flickered with a stuttering rhythm that didn't match electricity, but matched her heartbeat. The Polaroid on the bed still sat exactly where she left it, but its colors were warping now, bleeding. The image distorted, as though the air in the room was heating and bending the very concept of permanence. She looked down at the writing, break the right one, and there it was again. Choice. Lena's stomach knotted. Every time she thought she had torn her way out of the cycle, she landed right back at its center, and this time it wasn't a house or a forest or Eliza. It was her, only her. There were no more thresholds to cross, no more doors. Just her, a blade, and a mirror whispering like it had finally learned to breathe. She stepped closer to the mirror. Her reflection stood in perfect stillness, unaffected by the flickering light, unaffected by Lena's shallow, trembling breath. But it was wrong. Its pupils were too wide, its smile too faint and deliberate. There was a silence behind its eyes, a vacancy that made Lena's skin crawl. It wasn't her. It was something pretending. And behind the reflection, the room was not the room. It was the basement again, the chair again. But this time, it was Eliza strapped in, her head lulled to the side, lips parted, eyes open and glassy still, quiet. Lena blinked. The reflection changed. Now it was Noah in the chair, eyes wide with terror. His mouth moved silently. Again the image shifted. Now she sat there, head tilted, a trickle of blood down her temple, smiling like she had never been afraid of anything in her life. Lena felt her knees weaken. "No more," she whispered. The mirror stopped shifting. Her reflection stared at her again, but this time it reached out. Its hand touched the glass from the inside, mirroring her exact height. A faint pulse moved through the surface, as if it were water, rippling outward from that point of contact. And then it began to crack. A thin webbing of fractures raced across the glass, radiating out from the mirrored palm like lightning frozen in time. Lena didn't move. She knew what this was. Not a threat, an invitation. She stepped forward and placed her own palm against the glass. The cracks deepened instantly. Blood welled beneath her skin at the point of contact, her veins darkening, her pulse sensing to the hum rising from behind the mirror. Break the right one. There was more than one. She turned. Every surface now held a mirror. The window, the television screen, the picture frame by the nightstand. Each one shimmered faintly, and each one showed a different version of herself. One crouched in the woods, soaked in blood. One running through an endless hallway screaming. One smiling blankly behind the gas station counter. And one, just one, standing calmly in the house, the real house, holding the knife and crying. That one met her gaze, and whispered, though her lips didn't move, "I'm still me." Lena's hand shook. The knife felt heavier. Her mind raced. If she chose wrong, would she lock herself in another loop? Would she condemn the only real part of herself to another reflection? She had seconds. The other versions began to speak. All of them. At once. "Pick me, I'm the one who remembers." "No, me. I never gave in." "Don't believe her?" She smiled when she killed him. She already chose wrong once. "You have to break the right one, Lena, please." The room pulsed again. The walls bowed inward. The glass began to vibrate. She couldn't hear her thoughts anymore. Only voices, endless voices echoing herself back at her. All of them desperate. All of them pretending to be the one that mattered. She turned, faced the version that had cried. The one in the house. The one who didn't speak. Lena took one breath, then raised the knife, and drove it straight into that mirror. The glass didn't shatter outward. It collapsed inward, like it was sucking the blade into itself. The room exploded in soundless force. A scream without sound, a burst without heat, and Lena was yanked forward, her body thrown through the surface like she was being reborn backwards. Then silence. True silence. When she opened her eyes, she was standing in the real house. No ash, no rot, just silence. And light. Noah was there, in the doorway. He looked the same, but different. Not broken, not twisted, not bleeding, just tired. He stepped forward. "Lena?" She nodded. "It was me. I know." "Was it always me?" He hesitated. "It was never not you." She looked down at her hand. The knife was gone. So was the scar. The mirrors had vanished from the walls. But on the floor in the center of the room was a small pool of water. Still, shallow. She looked into it and saw only herself. No smile, no shadow, just her. She exhaled, shaky and slow, and somewhere deep in the house, a door creaked open. This one she hadn't seen before. No frame, no light beyond. Just a hallway, long, new, waiting. Lena turned to Noah. "Do we walk through it?" He smiled. Tired but sure. "Only if you want it to end." Lena nodded, and together they stepped forward. The door swallowed them. Not violently, not with the teeth and force that had accompanied every threshold she'd crossed before. This time the silence was worse. No hum, no chant, no pull, just stillness, vast and aching. The hallway stretched out before them, narrow and infinite. The floor made of warped wood that creaked not beneath their feet, but after they stepped. The walls weren't walls at all but mirrors, tall, seamless panes on either side, running the length of the corridor, each one holding still, watching. Lena walked in step with Noah. Neither spoke, because words didn't belong here. It felt like stepping into the spine of the thing that had followed them their entire lives. Not just the house, not just Eliza, but the memory of it, the idea of it. This hallway wasn't a place, it was the story they were trapped in. Every footfall echoed with memories that hadn't happened yet. Every reflection showed a moment they'd never lived but might. Lena caught glimpses of herself as they walked. One mirror showed her sitting in a classroom, head bowed over a book, her classmates featureless blobs of motion. Another, she sat alone at a kitchen table, picking at food, while behind her, something black and boneless pressed its face against the window. Then one stopped her cold. She stood before it, motionless, staring at the version inside. It was her, but older, weathered, hair streaked with gray, eyes tired. She was holding a child, a baby, swaddled in a patchwork quilt that bore symbols Lena had only seen carved into the walls of the original house. The woman looked up, met Lena's gaze, and whispered, "I named her Eliza." Lena staggered backward. Noah caught her by the arm, steadying her. "That's not real," he said. "It could be." He nodded. "But it doesn't have to be." They kept walking. The hallway darkened. Not from lack of light, but from density. The air thickened. The reflections became less distinct, more distorted. Each version of herself looked wrong now. Heads cocked at impossible angles, jaws unhinged, fingers too long, smiles that didn't stop. Some looked directly at her as she passed. Some pressed against the glass, palms flattening, mouths moving in silent, desperate mimicry. Then the corridor ended. Not in a door, not in a wall, just stopped. An abyss stretched before them, black and absolute, like someone had taken a blade and sliced the world in half. Noah turned to her. "We jump, don't we? I think we fall. Same thing." She looked back one last time. The hallway was gone. Only the dark ahead and the soft sound of something breathing on the other side of nothing. They stepped off the edge together. No wind, no gravity, just sensation. Colors that didn't exist smeared across her skin. Voices from every direction and none. Her heartbeat scattered like glass dropped on marble. She wasn't falling anymore. She was unraveling. And at the very center of that nothing, she found it. A room, small, stone. No doors, no mirrors, just one chair. And in that chair, Eliza, no longer a child, no longer a phantom. She looked like Lena now. Same eyes, same face, same everything. The perfect reflection. "You made it," Eliza said, voice soft, steady. Lena stepped forward. "You knew I would. I made sure of it." "Why?" Eliza stood, brushing ash from her skirt. "Because I needed you to understand what it means to remember, what it costs to hold on to truth." Lena's jaw clenched. "You took my family. I showed you what they were, what they could be. I didn't choose your story, Lena. You did. Every time you picked the mirror, every time you walked into the house, every time you followed instead of fled." Lena stared at her. "So what now? You want me to become you?" Eliza smiled. "You already did." And with that, she stepped forward. The room blurred, the stone walls dissolved, and Lena was standing in the center of the root trees clearing again. Alone. But not. The dolls lay scattered. The roots had withered. The sky above was fractured, spider-webbed with light that flickered between stars and something else. Noah sat beneath the tree, head in his hands. He looked up when she approached. "You came back." "I never left." He nodded, then said, "Look." She turned and saw it, the mirror. Floating in the center of the clearing, spinning slowly. A single word scrawled across the glass in blood, "Choose." Lena stepped forward. The mirror didn't reflect her. It showed a door. Wooden, familiar, the front door of the house. But behind it something pulsed. Waiting, she reached out, touched the surface, and for the first time the mirror accepted her. No resistance, no pain, just warmth, understanding, and a whisper. Soft as breath, some reflections don't need to be escaped. Only understood. Lena closed her eyes and stepped through. It wasn't stepping through. It was being absorbed. As Lena touched the surface of the mirror, the sensation was neither falling nor walking, but something deeper. Like the world unfolded into her rather than around her, and suddenly her breath wasn't her own. Her memories flared and died like sparks in water. For a moment, she couldn't tell if her eyes were open or closed, or if there was even a difference anymore. She didn't know how long she was in the dark, only that when light returned, it did so quietly. She was standing on a porch. The porch, weather-worn floorboards beneath her feet, that same crooked welcome mat still there, the one she'd tripped over at 7, split her chin open. The door in front of her was closed, its brass knob tarnished with age. But the smell hit her before the memories: scorched wood, distant lavender, and the bitter trace of old blood. The house had been rebuilt, but not replaced. This wasn't a new version. This was the original one, preserved, just waiting for her to come back full circle. The mirror had brought her to the beginning, but she wasn't the same girl who'd stood here the first time. Lena pressed her hand against the door. Warm, breathing. She didn't knock. She didn't need to. The door unlatched with a soft click and opened inward on its own. Inside, silence, but not emptiness. She stepped through, expecting dust, decay, the rot of long-forgotten memories. But what greeted her was the living version of the house. The one from childhood. Photos straight. Furniture in place. The same ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Steady, certain. The past hadn't just lingered. It had been maintained. And waiting by the stairs, her father. He didn't look up. Didn't move. He sat in his chair, one hand resting on the armrest, the other on his knee, like he'd fallen asleep mid-thought. But his chest didn't rise. His body didn't twitch. Lena stepped closer and realized he wasn't breathing, but his eyes were open. Glass eyes, mirror eyes. They reflected only her. Every movement, every flinch, like he was watching from the inside of his own body. "Dad," she whispered. No response. She reached out slowly. And the moment her fingers brushed his arm, a crack echoed through the room, like something breaking underground. The lights flickered. The photo frames on the walls tilted, and from the top of the stairs, a familiar voice drifted down. "You shouldn't be here." Eliza. But not the twisted child. Not the warped woman. This Eliza was something in between, some liminal, perfect version of her own memory. She looked just like Lena had always imagined she might. Not a monster, not a ghost. Just a girl frozen at the edge of growing up. "I thought you wanted me to come," Lena said. Eliza descended the stairs slowly, bare feet silent on the steps. "I wanted you to see it. Really see it. The house." Eliza smiled softly. "Yourself." The floorboards creaked beneath Lena's feet, but she didn't step back. "I've seen all the versions. I've broken the mirrors. I've made the choice." "You made a choice," Eliza corrected, "but not the choice." Lena's heart tightened. "Then what is this?" Another test. Another trick. Eliza stepped past her father's motionless body and stood inches from her. Her voice was calm, pitying. "This is the last door, the one you locked behind your eyes so long ago you forgot it was ever real." Lena blinked. "What door?" Eliza raised a hand and touched Lena's chest. "This one." And suddenly, she was somewhere else. Not the house, not the forest. A hospital. Bright, sterile. A hallway she hadn't remembered in years. Flashing exit signs. A rolling bed being pushed fast down a corridor. And her own voice screaming, "Let me go with her." She remembered now. She was 10. Eliza had been real once. A neighbor, a friend. They'd played together. Slept over in this very house. Until the night Eliza wandered into the woods behind Wither Lane and didn't come back. Until Lena followed. But only one girl returned. And everyone assumed Lena had imagined the rest. No body was found. No records. Just a trail of nightmares. Therapy. Years of it. She'd buried the truth in mirrors. In stories. Until it became a story. Until Eliza was no longer a friend she lost, but a thing she fought. The memory crushed her now. In the hospital, her mother held her as she sobbed uncontrollably in a stiff plastic chair. Nurses passed by with quiet looks. No one believed her when she said, "She's still in there. She's in the house. I saw her in the mirror." Lena collapsed to her knees in the memory. But the floor was the wood of the house again, back in the living room. Eliza still stood before her. "I didn't die," Eliza said. "Not really. But I didn't get to leave either." Lena looked up, tears in her eyes. "Why me?" "Because you opened the door. And you closed it. You shut me in and walked away. And when they told you to forget, you did. But I didn't stop waiting." The house shifted around them. The windows darkened. The hum returned, low and sad now, a lullaby in reverse. And Lena knew. This wasn't about breaking mirrors. This was about unbreaking the memory that started it all. She reached forward, took Eliza's hand. It was warm, alive, not cursed, not dead. Just stuck. "I'm sorry," Lena said. And for the first time since she'd entered the house, Eliza smiled without malice. "I forgive you," she whispered. The walls shook. Photos fell. The air sucked inward as if the house itself had taken its final breath. And a voice, not Eliz's, not Lena's, boomed from every board, every mirror, every reflection they'd ever left behind. Then, the house has no purpose. Lena stood, pulling Eliza to her feet, then let it fall. Cracks raced across the floor. The ceiling groaned. A mirror on the far wall burst like a bubble. And the others followed, one by one, shattering into dust that didn't fall but evaporated. Eliza stepped forward, and Lena stepped with her, and the front door, closed for so long, opened. No resistance, no trick, only sunlight. And as they crossed the threshold, the house collapsed behind them, not burning, not screaming, just ending. And Lena felt something leave her. Not a ghost, not a curse, just weight. For the first time in years, she could breathe without mirrors in her lungs. Beside her, Eliza stared at the trees. She smiled gently. I think I'm done here. And she stepped forward, fading with the breeze. Lena didn't stop her. She just stood there, on the edge of Wither Lane, no longer trapped, no longer split across reflections. Just whole, just herself. And somewhere far off, the mirrors went silent. Lena didn't move for a long time. The woods stretched out before her, still and wide, and emptied of menace. The sunlight filtered through the trees in soft, golden ribbons, catching dust in the air like falling glitter. There were no whispers, no shadows where they shouldn't be. For the first time in a lifetime of silence that had always felt watched, Lena was alone in a way that felt honest. But the stillness didn't bring relief. Not yet. It only brought the aftertaste. That sharp, metallic weight of something ending before the mind had caught up. The house behind her was gone. Completely. Not rubble, not ash, just a blank patch of earth as if it had never existed. The trees that once bowed around its structure stood taller now, unburdened. But Lena didn't look back at where it had been. She couldn't. Looking backward had always been the first step in being taken. Instead, she turned down the road. The real road, the one outside the illusion. The cracked pavement of Wither Lane stretched ahead in winding silence. For a few hundred feet, it almost looked normal, but she knew better than to expect peace. She started walking, step by step, letting the wind brush her arms like a forgotten memory. Her feet were bare, and every stone or twig was a reminder that she was here, that she wasn't dreaming anymore, that the mirrors were gone and the reflections were hers alone again. And yet, as she walked, a sound caught her attention, barely there, distant, a footstep. Not hers. She paused, turned, nothing. No figure, no silhouette. Just the hush of trees in the distance. But the air had a thickness to it now, the kind that came before a storm. Not of weather, but of memory. Her spine tensed. No, she asked, barely above a whisper. Silence. And then, behind her, a quiet click, the sound of a camera. She spun. There, in the center of the path, was a single Polaroid. No camera, no person. Just the picture lying face down in the dirt. She approached slowly, each step measured like the wrong movement might restart something she'd only just ended. She picked it up. It hadn't developed yet. Blank. Then, like breath on glass, the image began to fade in. It was her, taken from behind, walking this road, moments ago, and in the trees behind her, barely visible in the shadows, stood a shape, tall, human, faceless. A black smudge where a head should be. Her fingers trembled. She didn't remember being followed. She didn't hear anyone behind her. But the picture didn't lie. She turned again. Nothing. The road was empty. But she knew the game by now. Knew how the rules worked. The house was gone. But that didn't mean the echo was. Something didn't want to be forgotten. Something wanted to be remembered, even after its mirrors had been shattered. And something had taken Noah. She quickened her pace. Each turn of the lane brought her deeper into memory again. Not forced visions, but organic ones. The old swing that once hung from a dead tree. The carved initials on the back of a road sign. the patch of pavement still stained with old oil from her dad's truck that never started on cold mornings. Every landmark stabbed her with familiarity. This wasn't haunting, it was history, and it was trying to wake something up. Up ahead, a figure, real this time. She broke into a run.
No!
She shouted, but as she got closer, she realized it wasn't him. It was her. Another Lena, standing still staring up at the sky. Her skin was pale, her mouth slack and her eyes, open and completely black, no whites, no irises, just void. This version didn't move until Lena got within arm's reach, then slowly turned her head. "I saw you choose," it whispered. "You chose to end it." Lena took a step back. "I did, but it didn't choose to end you." The reflection blinked, and a mirror formed behind her, standing vertically in the middle of the road. No frame, no base, just the same old silver surface, and in that reflection, Noah, but not as he was. This version looked hollowed out, eyes sunken, hands bruised. He was strapped to a chair again, but it wasn't the basement. It looked like the motel room, only darker. "Help," he mouthed. Then the mirror cracked across the center, a jagged line splitting his image down the middle. Lena turned to the doppelganger. "What is this? Why are you still here?" The false Lena smiled with all her teeth. "You broke the house, not the memory." And with that, she lunged. But the mirror didn't show it. In the glass, the attack hadn't happened. The reflection just stood there, still and calm, while in reality, Lena grappled with her own hands, trying to wrap around her throat. She fought back, hard, elbowed the doppelganger in the face, heard the crack of bone, but no blood came. No expression of pain, just that impossible smile. She reached for the knife at her hip out of instinct, but there was nothing there. Only glass. She'd brought the reflection with her, and it had decided it didn't want to leave. The ground beneath her trembled. The trees bent toward the road, and in every branch, every puddle, every reflective surface around her, the house returned, not in full, but in flashes. The attic window, the nursery light, the staircase, the basement's red bulb swinging. 100 fragments forming a mosaic in the world around her. The mirror didn't need a building anymore. It was building a world, piece by piece, in her. The doppelganger hissed, "You were always going to be the door," and Lena realized what she meant. She hadn't just survived. She had contained it. By surviving, by choosing, by refusing, she had carried the mirror's last spark out into the world. She was the new threshold. A walking invitation. And if she didn't end it now, truly end it, she'd be the next haunted house. The next trap for someone else. She stumbled back toward the mirror in the road, heart racing, thoughts flickering like a bad signal. If it needed a door, then she'd slam it shut. She turned to the mirror, raised her hand, and before the reflection could stop her, she whispered, "I choose silence," and she struck the glass with her bare fist. The mirror didn't break. It swallowed, and the entire world went white. There was no noise at first, no crash, no impact. Just the clean, sudden absence of everything. Like the entire world had taken a single sharp breath and refused to exhale. Lena was suspended in a blinding white that wasn't light. It was erasure. There were no shadows, no sense of space, just the feeling of her body floating, while her thoughts scrambled to find footing, slipping through her fingers like mist. Even her heartbeat sounded distant now, like it had to push through layers of cotton and static just to reach her ears. She tried to speak but found no voice. Her lips moved, her throat strained, but nothing came. The silence was total, not peaceful, imprisoning. Something about it was wrong in a way that made her bones ache, as if her skeleton itself remembered a sound that should have filled this place but had been stripped away. Her skin tingled, like being watched, and she realized with dread that she wasn't alone here. Across from her, emerging like a bruise in the white, stood another shape. Not a mirror, not Eliza, not the reflection she'd fought. This was new. A version of her so far removed, so stretched by trauma, that it barely resembled her anymore. The skin was dry and translucent, pulsing slightly over what looked like bones, but moved too fluidly. The face was the worst part. Mouth stitched in a crude X, eyes wide, blackened, and staring without blinking. And from the creature's chest, a steady pulse glowed, a familiar heartbeat, her own, stolen and encased behind its ribs like a trapped flame. It didn't speak, it projected. Thoughts poured into Lena's head without sound, raw, primal things. Grief, guilt, memory. The feeling of her mother's cold hands after the funeral. The sensation of her nails breaking against the bathroom mirror as she tried to claw her reflection away. The long nights as a child, when she saw faces pressed to the glass in her bedroom and never dared tell anyone because she knew they'd say it was her imagination. This thing had kept them all. Every suppressed moment, every flinch, every fracture. She tried to back away, but the whiteness offered no direction. The space expanded with her fear, stretching forever. The creature stepped forward and something clicked inside her. A memory snapping into place. It wasn't showing her pain. It was feeding on it. This was what had been buried in the deepest mirror. The core. The seed. The purest piece of the house that couldn't be destroyed with fire or knives or shattered glass. Because it wasn't in the house. It was her. Born the moment she chose to forget Eliza. The moment she let the lie bury the truth. This was her silence. The thing she'd built around herself to survive, and now it wanted to consume her whole. Lena reached for anything. Something sharp, something solid. But her hands closed on nothing. She was naked in every sense, stripped of weapons, armor, even identity. The creature lunged without moving. 1 second it stood yards away. The next, it was in front of her, breathless, its mouth splitting open at the seams with wet threads snapping one by one. Its jaw fell unnaturally wide, and inside wasn't a throat, but mirrors, endless, spinning mirrors. Each one showed her, crying, screaming, running, dying, failing. She tried to close her eyes but couldn't. The thing forced her to look, and each second of exposure sapped her strength. Her legs buckled. She dropped to her knees in the white void, face pale, teeth clenched as wave after wave of herself, broken, scared, desperate, washed over her like punishment. And that's when she saw it. In one of the mirrors, buried among the others, a version of herself that looked different. Calm, bloodied but smiling, not the smile of madness or surrender, but of understanding. She wasn't running in that version. She was standing inside the house, holding a shard of glass up to her chest, whispering something into it. A single word, remember. Lena stared, frozen. The creature hesitated, as if the mirror's presence disrupted its hold. Its stitched face twitched, eyes fluttering like something knocked off rhythm. Lena forced herself to her feet. "You're only here because I made you," she whispered, her voice returning like breath through frost. The thing snarled. "You are the silence I let grow, the thing I used to not feel. But I feel now?" The creature stepped back. "I remember Eliza. I remember the house. I remember the truth." The pulse in the creature's chest dimmed. Lena stepped forward, hands still trembling but strong. "You're not my shadow. You're my shield. And I don't need you anymore." With that, she reached toward the heartbeat inside the thing's chest. It screamed. Not with sound, but with absence, a pressure that made her ears bleed. She kept reaching. Her hand passed through its skin like water, gripped the pulse, and pulled. The light shot through her arm, searing pain through her body, but she didn't let go. The creature's form began to crack, splintering from the center. And in one final moment, before it burst into dust, it locked eyes with her and mouthed a question. "What will you be without me?" Then it was gone. The white began to collapse, falling inward, becoming real. Color returned. Soil, sky, breath. And Lena opened her eyes to find herself back in the clearing. The root tree stood before her, but this time its roots didn't twitch, its bark didn't bleed. It was just a tree, and the wind was just wind. Noah stood at the edge of the field, alive, waiting. She rose, unsteady but whole, and as she walked toward him, she left no footprints behind. The ground had forgotten her weight. The forest, for the first time, had no reflection to give back. She wasn't part of the house anymore. She had finally left. But she didn't answer the creature's question. Not yet, because she didn't know the answer, but she would. Soon. Lena didn't sleep that night. She sat cross-legged in the damp clearing beneath the root tree, watching the leaves sway gently under a moon that felt too bright for the world she had just crawled out of. Noah had fallen asleep a few feet away, curled into his coat, breathing evenly like someone who hadn't screamed through the bowels of hell with her only days earlier. She envied that calm. She didn't trust it, because Lena had felt the silence die, and things don't die without leaving stains. The name kept circling her mind. Not hers, not Elise's. A third name, one she didn't recognize but felt pressing against her memory, like a fingertip through thin glass. It hovered on the edge of thought, just out of reach, like the title of a book you read in childhood and can't find again. It came with a feeling, sick, cold, wet, like rain that had soaked her clothes but never touched her skin. Something was missing. When the sun finally bled over the horizon, Noah stirred. He blinked slowly, rubbed his eyes, and looked at her with an expression she didn't recognize. Not pity, not gratitude, recognition. "You remember it too," she said before he could speak. He nodded slowly. "The third one." She hugged her knees, her voice barely above a breath. "I keep hearing the name, but it's muffled, like it's underwater." Noah glanced around the clearing. "It's not here. It's not anywhere anymore." "But it was," she insisted, heart beginning to race. "It was always there. We just looked away." He looked down, then pulled something from his coat pocket and held it out to her. A Polaroid, faded. The colors had melted in the heat of time, but the shapes were still clear enough. 3 children. One was Lena, one was Noah, and the third, blurred beyond recognition, like someone had pressed their thumb against the emulsion before it dried. She stared at it, her mouth dry. The image should have brought warmth. Instead, it brought nausea. The third child was wearing a yellow raincoat, the same raincoat she remembered seeing hanging in the hallway closet as a kid. She always thought it was hers. Her mother told her so. But now, Lena shook her head. "Who is it?" Noah hesitated, then spoke a name. A single syllable. It struck her like a slap, because her body recognized it. Her mouth remembered how to shape it, but her mind recoiled. The name had been erased. Not from records, from reality. Like the mirrors, like the house. It was part of the system that had been shattered. And somehow, in breaking free, they'd unearthed something older, something before Eliza. The image blurred further in her hand. "Why now?" she asked. Noah didn't answer, but the wind did. It shifted abruptly, bringing with it the unmistakable sound of singing. A child's voice, no words, just melody, soft, haunting, coming from the trees behind the tree line. Lena stood, so did Noah, and as they crossed into the woods again, despite every instinct telling them not to, she knew deep down they weren't heading into danger. They were heading into what had been forgotten. The path ahead wasn't carved out like before. No markings, no ritual, just dirt and roots, and branches closing in tighter the further they walked. The singing grew clearer. The melody hurt, not in the physical way, but in that emotional, too familiar ache, like someone playing the tune from a long, dead lullaby your mother once sang through tears. They found the source in a clearing, a pond, small, still, surrounded by stones marked with hand-carved symbols, crooked X and spirals and jagged arrows, and sitting at the edge of the water, the yellow raincoat, empty, soaking wet, folded perfectly. Lena's mouth opened, but the air was suddenly so heavy she couldn't speak. The singing had stopped, but its echo lingered in the branches, like a voice that had been waiting for years to be heard again. Noah knelt by the coat, touched it. It was warm, not just recently worn, lived in. He turned it over and found something beneath it. A second Polaroid. This one undeveloped. He handed it to Lena. Her fingers trembled as she held it. The image faded in. But not all at once. It came in layers. First the pond, then the coat, then the girl, face down in the water, hair floating like dark seaweed. And written in white at the bottom, not in blood this time, not in ink, but carved into the photo with something sharp I never left. Lena dropped the picture. The air bent around them. The trees twisted. And behind them, the sound of a door creaking open. But there was no door, just the forest. Just that name again, pressing harder now, echoing from tree bark and moss and the stones around the pond. Not Eliza, not Lena, the third. And Lena understood. This hadn't been about a haunted house. It hadn't been about Eliza. It had always been about the one they didn't remember, the one they chose to forget. And now, she had remembered them. The true haunting had only just begun. Lena couldn't breathe. The trees weren't just still, they were watching. Every branch, every knot in the wood, every twisting shadow on the moss-covered ground had an eye, and each of those eyes knew something she didn't. The forest didn't feel like the same one she had walked through before. It had grown. Not in size, but in awareness. It was listening to her thoughts, tasting the air around her words, bending slightly with every realization she uncovered. The pond, still and perfectly round, reflected nothing now. No sky, no trees. Just black glass, and the yellow coat folded at its edge like an offering. Noah crouched near the water, fingers brushing the soil as though trying to find something beneath it. Roots, maybe, or memory. Lena stared at the Polaroid again, the one she had dropped. It now lay face down in the dirt. She picked it up slowly, like it might burn her. The image had changed. The girl's body wasn't face down anymore. Now she was sitting up, halfway out of the water, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. The hair still hung wet across her face, but the face itself, Lena couldn't see it clearly. It wasn't blurred. It was missing. Like someone had carefully removed it with shears and left everything else intact. Noah stood suddenly. "We said her name once," he said, voice hollow. "Back then. Just once. After she disappeared." Lena nodded slowly, but no one believed us. "They said we made her up, that she wasn't real, because they never remembered her." The realization sank into them, both like a hook behind the ribs. The third child had been real, more real than Eliza, more real than the house, and whatever power they had stumbled into had made a deal. To keep the world clean, to bury the cracks in a reflection so deep no one would find it unless they looked too long. "We did this," Lena whispered. "We let them take her." She didn't remember what they were afraid of. Not clearly. Just that they had been told never to follow her, never to speak her name again. And something in their child minds, desperate to survive, desperate to not be like her, had obeyed. Lena's throat tightened. "Do you remember what we called her?" Noah hesitated. Then, Maris. The name didn't sound right in the air. It shook something. The trees pulled inward, and the pond rippled without wind. Lena clutched her stomach, dizzy all of a sudden. Like the word had kicked her equilibrium off a ledge. Maris. The girl with the yellow coat. The third child. The silence they chose to bury. She remembered, in flashes now. Playing hide and seek, the three of them, in the backyard that didn't exist anymore. Lena and Noah would always team up. Maris didn't mind. She liked to hide. She liked the quiet. But sometimes she'd hide for too long. Hours. Once, a whole night. When they found her, she said she had been talking to the girl in the wall. They thought she was pretending. They had to. Until the last time. When they played in the woods. When she said, "I'm going to show you the door." And only two of them came back. Lena stared at the water. "I think she's still here." Noah nodded slowly. "I think this place remembers her better than we do." The air shifted again, sudden and violent, like the forest took a breath all at once. The sound of branches snapping echoed around them. Not close, not far. Then the trees began to flicker. One blink, green forest. Next blink, gray hallway. Another blink, brick walls windowless. Lina's head swam. The forest was peeling itself apart, revealing layers beneath layers. All of them places she didn't recognize but felt. Like walking through dreams she'd forgotten. They were being pulled into something again. No ritual. No door. No mirrors. Just the memory of guilt. She took a step toward the pond. No, Noah warned. Lina, don't. But she was already kneeling, reaching for the coat. The moment her fingers touched the wet yellow fabric, the world dropped out from under her. It wasn't a fall. It was a drag. Something pulling her down. Not into the water, but through it. The black surface swallowed her without splash or sound, and her last sight before slipping under was Noah's face twisting in horror, his mouth screaming her name. Then darkness. No air, no light, but not drowning, drifting. And in that drifting, a voice, soft, familiar. You left me here. Lina turned, but there was no direction. The water, if that's what it was, surrounded her completely. But she knew that voice. Not Eliza. Not herself. Maris. You promised you'd find me, the voice said. Lena tried to speak, but her mouth filled with silence. The guilt was choking her now, not metaphorical. It had shape. Hands. It gripped her throat like it had waited years to do this. A presence formed in the black, a child-sized figure. No face. No features. Just the coat, still dripping, still yellow in the dark. You let them take my name. Lena sobbed. I was scared. The figure moved closer. Do you remember what I told you? Before I walked away. Lena nodded. Don't look in the door if you're not ready to see yourself. Maris stepped closer. I looked. And then, finally, Lena saw her face. Not horrifying, not monstrous, just a girl, pale, young, still 7 years old, but her eyes held decades. The kind of loneliness that stretched beyond time. She reached out her hand. Lena took it. And just like that, they were standing again. On land. Not the clearing, not the forest, a basement, a real one, dusty, forgotten. With a mirror on the wall, not broken, not alive. Just a mirror. Lena and Maris stood side by side in its reflection. And behind them, Noah, still at the pond. Still reaching, still calling for her. Maris looked up. I want to go home now. Lena nodded. I'll take you there. But when she turned, the door wasn't there. Only the mirror, still silent, waiting. As if to say, you want to fix this. Then walk through one last time. Lena swallowed hard, took Maris's hand again, and stepped forward. The mirror didn't shatter and it didn't ripple. This time, it simply opened like a breath being drawn in reverse, and Lena stepped through with Maris clinging tightly to her hand. It wasn't like the other transitions, those violent plunges into darkness or abrupt pulls through space. This one was smooth, too smooth. The world didn't drag her under, it guided her, as if something had been waiting patiently on the other side, like a door left unlocked. Not because it welcomed visitors, but because it had no fear of them returning. They emerged in the living room. The old living room. Exactly as it had been on the day Maris disappeared. The furniture arranged with rigid care. The clock ticking, each second too loud, like the house was reminding them it still controlled time here. The curtains didn't sway. The air was thick, unmoving. A stillness so deep it felt forced, like the house had paused itself, mid-thought, uncertain how to react now that its lost peace had come home. Maris let go of Lena's hand. She stepped into the center of the room, her small form casting no shadow. Her footsteps made no sound. She wasn't a ghost. She wasn't alive. She was a memory brought into flesh. Too sharp to fade and too raw to forgive. Lena felt the air tighten as she followed. It was like the walls were closing in on the concept of her. Not just her body. The house didn't like her here. It hadn't invited her this time. It had shown her everything it wanted, given her the rituals, the trials, the mirrors, all orchestrated to end her. But she had dragged something back inside with her, that it couldn't erase the truth. The floorboards groaned low, not under her feet, but inside the walls, like something pacing anxious. "I don't think it knows what to do with me," Maris said quietly. Lena knelt beside her. "Because it didn't think you'd come back." Maris nodded, her gaze fixed on the stairwell. "It made me forget myself for so long. But I remembered through you. Every time you got close to the truth, I got stronger." Lena felt her stomach tighten. "Why the house, Maris? Why you? Why this?" Maris turned to her, and for the first time, Lena saw something strange in the girl's eyes. Not fear, not grief, pity. Because someone had to be forgotten, and I was small enough to fit through the cracks. The house groaned again, louder now. The lights above them flickered, not in panic, in anger. "You were the seed," Lena whispered. Maris smiled faintly. "I was the first one the house swallowed. And when it needed a story to hide itself in, it made me a footnote." The lights shattered. Darkness fell instantly, like a curtain dropped from the ceiling. But they could still see. Not with their eyes, but with something deeper. Something buried in memory and emotion. The wallpaper peeled itself upward, revealing hundreds of tiny fingernail scratches underneath. Not decorative. Desperate. 1,000 attempts to claw back to the surface. Lena reached for Maris, but the girl had already begun to step toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" she asked. Maris didn't answer. She just climbed, each footfall silent, each step creaking after she passed. Lena followed. She didn't want to. Every instinct screamed to turn around, to leave this place while she still remembered her name. But she had brought Maris here, and she couldn't abandon her again. The upstairs hallway was worse than she remembered. Longer, more narrow. The doors on either side multiplied as they walked, blinking in and out of existence, some open with light spilling through, others nailed shut. Some whispered, others whimpered. Lena focused on Maris, only on her. They stopped at the last door. The attic. Its frame was cracked. The knob rusted. Lena placed her hand on it. It turned on its own. The door swung open with a scream that wasn't mechanical. It was vocal, pain. Inside the attic as she'd seen it before. But no mirror, just a chair. And the mask. The same one the doll had worn. The one she had seen carved into tree bark. The same expressionless oval, flat and white with two deep, hollow eyes and a mouth stitched into a permanent frown. It sat in the chair, waiting. Maris stepped inside, and the mask rose. No body, no figure. Just the mask lifting slowly into the air. "Why did you come back?" it asked. The voice was low, genderless, worn thin by age and use. Maris didn't flinch. "Because I was left here. You were forgotten. That was the deal." Maris stepped closer. "You lied. You agreed." Lena felt something twist inside her. This wasn't the house speaking. This wasn't the curse. This was the thing inside it. The maker. The mask tilted toward her now, and you. You were the next. The one who was meant to take her place. Lena clenched her fists. "I didn't." "No," it hissed. "You remembered. You brought her name into the house. That name was never meant to survive. You erased her," Lena spat. "You built everything on her absence. I needed absence," the voice snapped. "To be believed. To be wanted. To be feared." Maris took one last step forward. She reached into her coat, pulled out the Polaroid. The one with her body in the pond. She held it up. "This is my proof." The mask twitched, cracked. Tiny fractures raced along its surface like lightning. "No," it whispered. "You don't exist." "I do now," she said. The photo glowed faintly in her hand, and the attic shook. The house began to come apart. Not violently, not explosively, but as if forgetting itself. Pictures blinked off the walls. Floorboards vanished under their feet but left them standing. The hallway behind them unraveled like yarn. The mask screamed, not in rage, but in terror. It tried to rush her, but Maris stepped forward and pressed the photo to it. There was no explosion, no light, just reversal. The mask imploded, folded in on itself with a sound like paper crumpling, and then it was gone. And with it, so was the attic, and the house, and the forest, and all the mirrors. Lena opened her eyes in the field again. Daylight, the wind gentle. Noah stood beside her, blinking hard like he'd just woken from the deepest sleep. And Maris, gone. Not vanished. Not faded. Gone in the way a wound heals. No fanfare. Just peace. Lena sat down in the grass, eyes wet. She didn't know if the house would ever come back, if something else would rise in its place. But she knew this. Some stories don't need to be rewritten. They just need to be remembered. They didn't talk for a long time. Lena and Noah sat side by side in the field where the house used to stand, watching the trees sway as if nothing had ever been wrong. The grass grew evenly now with no patchwork of ash or broken ground, and the air felt clean. Not just in the lungs, but in the soul. It was the kind of quiet that came after a long cry, after the body let go of something it had held too tightly for too long. But even in that peace, Lena could feel the pressure of something unfinished, like a breath held somewhere deep in the world, waiting to be exhaled. She's gone, isn't she? Noah asked, voice hoarse. Lena nodded. She was never meant to be here this long. None of us were. That silence returned, but now it was heavy with questions neither of them could quite reach. What had Maris really been? A child lost in a story that refused to let her go, or the story itself, forced into human shape to bear the weight of memory everyone else abandoned? Lena didn't know. All she could do was remember her. That felt like a kind of justice. Maybe the only kind that mattered. Noah picked at a blade of grass and rolled it between his fingers. You ever wonder if the house is still somewhere? Not like here, but in someone else's head. Lena didn't need to think about it. I think it always was. She lay back, staring up at the sky, watching the clouds move like slow bruises across a blue canvas. The shape of them almost seemed to form faces if she looked too long. She blinked it away. Some habits would take longer to break than others. What do we do now? Noah asked, more to himself than her. I don't know. Go home. The word tasted strange. Home. What did that even mean now? Their parents were gone. Their town. What remained of it wasn't their own anymore. The places they grew up in had been swallowed by shadows, replaced by haunting replicas. Even if the physical roads still existed, the version of themselves that once walked them didn't. Still, Lena said, yeah, we go home. Because she had to say something. And that seemed as close to an answer as the world would give. They walked back toward the road. The one that led through Wither Lane and out the other side. The one they had never finished walking as kids. The forest seemed to part for them now. Not in deference, but in dismissal. As if it was done with them. Its appetite had been fed, its bargain closed. They were no longer its prey or its protagonists. Just people. Just survivors. At the edge of the woods, where pavement began again, a car sat waiting. Lena recognized it immediately, though it hadn't been there when they went in. It was her mother's old car. Scratched. Faded. Missing a side mirror. Keys in the ignition. No explanation. No logic. Noah looked at her. You see this too, right? Yeah. They didn't question it. They got in. The engine started without a sound. They drove in silence for miles, trees turning into fields, fields into cracked fences, fences into quiet neighborhoods that still wore the sleep of early morning. The farther they got from the forest, the more Lena felt like something was being peeled off her skin, some invisible film that had clung to her all her life. Not just the house, not just Eliza, not just Maris, but her, the Lena who was always afraid, the Lena who always looked for reflections, the Lena who never said what she remembered out loud. Gone. Somewhere around the 10th mile, she finally asked, "Do you think anyone else remembers her now?" Noah didn't answer right away. Then, maybe that's not the point. She turned her head, watching him drive. What is? We do. The next town they entered was one neither of them recognized. Just a gas station, a diner with one blinking open sign, and a motel with faded blue shutters. Lena didn't need to say anything. Noah pulled into the lot without asking. Inside, the woman at the desk didn't look up when they entered. Her eyes were fixed on the static of an old box TV, and her lips moved slightly like she was humming something under her breath. Lena leaned closer, straining to hear the melody. It was the same one Maris had sung by the pond. No words, just a lullaby. The woman's fingers paused above the registry. She looked up, and in her eyes, for a flash, Lena saw the mirror. Not literally, but the echo of it. The woman blinked and smiled softly. Room 12 is clean. Noah stepped forward to pay, but Lena touched his arm. I've got it. When they got to the room, it was small. 2 beds, 1 lamp, a mirror on the back of the door. Of course. Lena reached up and pulled the mirror off its hook, flipped it over, and set it face down on the floor. Noah raised an eyebrow. You think that's enough? It is tonight. They didn't sleep right away. They lay in the quiet, not speaking, letting the world stop spinning for a little while. Eventually, Lena sat up, grabbed the room's pen and paper pad, and wrote one thing. Her name was Maris. We remember her. She folded it once and tucked it under the mirror. Not for safety, for truth. No matter where they went next, that would stay. And as she lay back in the motel bed, eyes closing slowly, Lena heard a voice. Not in her head, not from the room, but beneath everything. A whisper so soft it didn't need ears to hear thank you. And for the first time in her life, Lena slept without dreaming. When Lena awoke, she didn't know where she was. Not in the frightened way of forgetting, but in the quiet way of having, for once, rested so deeply that her mind had wandered somewhere it didn't want to leave. The room was dim, with slanted light filtering through the motel blinds, slicing the space into strips of pale blue and dust. The air was warm, still, normal. The kind of air people live in when they aren't being watched. Noah was still asleep in the other bed, limbs tangled in sheets, one arm dangling over the edge. She watched him breathe, his chest rising in even rhythm. That steady motion grounded her. Everything about this place whispered ordinary, which in their lives now felt like a miracle. But Lena had learned, miracles didn't come without cost. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and stepped softly to the mirror she'd turned face, down the night before. The folded note she'd tucked beneath it remained untouched, edges slightly curled, ink smudged faintly from the moisture in the room. Her message was still there. Her name was Maris. We remember her. But when Lena picked it up, there was something beneath it now. A second note, same paper, same pen, different handwriting. Not Noah's, not hers. Blocky, uneven letters, as if written by someone unused to shaping words. It read, "Remember me too." The message was unsigned. Her stomach turned, not from fear, but from recognition. Another voice, another forgotten shape. She stepped back instinctively, eyes scanning the corners of the room, every shadow suddenly suspect. But there was nothing out of place. The room was still just a motel room. The mirror still faced the floor. The door was still bolted. The silence was honest. She sat down slowly on the edge of the bed and stared at the note. They had remembered Maris, said her name, brought her back into the story, let her go. But she had never asked if she was the only one. The house was built on layers. Each story buried the last. Maris had been the first Lena forgot, but not necessarily the first who was taken. Lena's pulse began to rise. She picked up the mirror. This time, she didn't see her face. She saw a hallway. Not one she recognized. The walls were lined with paper, hundreds of sheets, each pinned to the surface. Some handwritten, others covered in red smears, some blank. The hallway stretched on, impossibly long, and at the far end stood a door, not made of wood or metal, paper, folded, taped, tattered, barely held together, and something was on the other side of it. A shape, tall and thin, standing motionless. The moment her eyes registered the figure, it turned toward her, and Lena flinched so hard the mirror slipped from her fingers and cracked on the floor. The spell broke. She was back in the motel. Noah was awake now, sitting up, rubbing his face. "You okay?" he asked groggily. She nodded, unsure if she should lie. "Bad dream." He looked at her carefully, then at the mirror on the floor. "You saw something again. Not the house. Something older." He frowned. "Older than the house." She handed him the second note. He read it, his brow tightening. "Do you think there are more?" Lena didn't answer at first. Then, "I think there always were." They packed quickly, silently. The road called them again, not out of purpose, but warning. She had assumed the house was the epicenter, the root. But maybe it was just one flower on a much larger vine that snaked beneath the world, blooming in forgotten corners wherever silence had taken root. And they had remembered now. That meant they could see. That meant they were part of the story again. Not the ending, just a turning page. They drove through unfamiliar towns, following no map, guided by instincts that felt less like decisions and more like inherited memory. Lena watched every mirror they passed, every window's reflection, every surface that gave back more than it should. The world felt layered now, like she could peel it back if she stared hard enough. That night, they stopped at a diner off a 2-lane highway. The waitress was kind, tired. Her eyes drifted to Lena once or twice like she recognized her, and then thought better of it. At the end of their meal, she handed them the check with a folded napkin on top. Noah opened it. Another note. 3 words. Room behind shelves. They looked at each other. Didn't speak. They knew the rules by now. Denial was an invitation. Pretending not to notice was how it grew. So they paid, thanked her, and when she turned her back, they stepped behind the register, down the narrow hallway marked employees only. The shelves were old, full of canned soup, paper cups, dust, but Lena felt it immediately, the draft. There was a gap between the shelving and the wall. They pushed. The whole unit creaked open like a door. Beyond it, a narrow stairwell leading down into cold darkness. Lena turned to Noah. His face said what hers couldn't. "Why us again?" And hers answered back in silence, "Because we remember." They descended, each step colder than the last. And when they reached the bottom, they found the paper hallway from the mirror, exactly as she'd seen it. The notes on the walls fluttered faintly as if stirred by a wind that wasn't there. And at the far end, the paper door waited. No knob. No lock. Just a message written across it in a scrawl that stretched the width of the frame: "Do not unfold." But something behind it whispered. Not a threat, a plea. And Lena knew. They were about to meet the one who came before. Lena stood frozen at the threshold, her breath shallow, her eyes fixed on the door. It looked fragile, too fragile to hold anything back. Constructed entirely from torn notebook pages, receipts, loose leaf scraps, and yellowed, curling edges of what looked like diary entries, it barely clung to the wall. Layers upon layers of desperate writing had been taped, stapled, pinned into one shape. Names were crossed out. Sentences ended mid-word. Some of the paper had been smeared with something brownish, red, long dried. Across it all, scrawled in block letters like a warning carved by someone with shaking hands: "Do no T UNFOLD." Behind her, Noah didn't say a word. She felt his presence, rigid, bracing. He wasn't going to stop her. He knew better. They had gone too far, sinned too much, remembered things that had cost them too dearly. Pretending ignorance now would be like putting a bandage over a broken mirror. The silence of the hallway wasn't natural. It was coerced, pressed down. She could feel the weight of it like someone's palm against her chest. Each step toward the paper door was like moving through syrup, her legs heavy, her stomach turning. The papers whispered when she passed, fluttering just slightly, and she saw fragments that made her throat tighten. "I am still here." She never opened it. He said I'd be forgotten too. The voices of the ones who came before. They hadn't just been silenced. They had been folded. Hidden inside the very walls. Lena stopped inches from the door. The air here smelled wrong. Not of rot, but old ink. Burnt dust. Forgotten breath. Her hand hovered over one of the corner folds. It was tucked in tightly, a precise triangle creased perfectly, a child's fold, like origami. One tug would unravel the entire thing. She turned slightly to Noah. If I do this, something's going to come through. He swallowed. Something already has. She let her fingers settle against the edge of the fold, and pulled. The first triangle unfolded with a brittle crack, no explosion, no scream, just the sound of air moving, inward. The door inhaled, the papers rippled. They weren't attached with glue or staples anymore. They peeled open in layers like petals, revealing a hidden bloom. Behind the folds, darkness pulsed, not empty, dense, a room without light, a chamber without time. Then came the voice, not a whisper, not a growl, but something impossibly young. You shouldn't have come. The doorway widened slowly, and Lena saw something standing within. At first, it looked like a child, maybe 10, maybe younger, barefoot, wearing a hospital gown 2 sizes too large, its skin pale, but not like sickness, like absence. No face, just blank skin where features should be. No mouth, yet the voice kept speaking. You were supposed to forget me, you promised. Lena's body locked, her mind skidding across pieces of memory that didn't feel like hers, but might have been. Days in hospital halls she couldn't recall, rooms with lights too bright, a name whispered by nurses and never repeated. Noah stepped closer to her. Lena. The figure turned slightly toward him. Its voice became sharp. You too. You played with me once. Then you closed the book. Noah went pale. I don't. You closed the book and walked away. They told you I wasn't real. You believed them. Lena stepped in front of him. Who are you? The figure tilted its head. Don't you remember? I used to be the story, before Maris, before the mirrors, before the house had a name, a pause. Then I was the first. The weight of the words hit her like a tidal wave. Of course. This thing, this child, had never wanted to scare them. It wasn't evil. It wasn't monstrous. It had just been alone, forgotten by every version of the tale, swallowed so deep even the house had buried it. What do you want? Lena asked softly. The figure stepped forward, to be seen, just once, by someone who remembers. Its hand reached out, trembling. A small palm. Paper-thin skin. Lena didn't hesitate. She took its hand. The moment contact was made, the room around them bloomed into images. 1,000 overlapping memories. Books tossed in school libraries. Drawings crumpled and thrown away. Birthday candles blown out with no one watching. A child's voice calling from a hallway, never answered. Names whispered once, then never again. This was the graveyard of the forgotten. Stories that were never told. People that were erased to make room for more marketable haunts. The figure squeezed her hand. Thank you. Then it stepped back and smiled. Not with a face, but with light. A golden ripple began at its center, pulsing outward, dissolving the paper room piece by piece. The notes curled into ash. The darkness peeled away. The figure faded, not like a ghost, like a wish finally spoken aloud. And then they were standing alone in a narrow basement. No folded door, no whispers, just dust and stone. Lena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Noah touched her shoulder. Did we fix it? She looked around. No. But we remembered it. That might be enough. As they climbed the stairs back into the diner, the sound of life returned. Plates clinking. A coffee machine hissing. Someone laughing at the counter. No one noticed them emerge. No one looked up. But on the wall behind the waitress, a new paper had been pinned. 3 words: she saw me, and that was all it said. Lena smiled. For the first time, the smile didn't come from survival. It came from understanding, and behind her, in the reflection of the diner window, for just a heartbeat, a faceless child waved goodbye. The farther they drove from the diner, the more the world felt like it was stitching itself back together. The sky was clearer, the sun warmer, and the road ahead no longer seemed to twist with malice or hidden intent. Still, Lena kept one hand near the glove box, where she'd tucked away the folded notes from the paper hallway. the ones that hadn't burned or vanished. They weren't written in her handwriting, or Noah's, and the longer she held on to them, the more they seemed to hum with some low, persistent echo. They weren't just pieces of paper anymore. They were breadcrumbs, leading somewhere neither of them could yet see. Noah drove without speaking, his fingers wrapped tight around the steering wheel. He hadn't said much since they left the basement behind, and Lena didn't push. They both needed the silence for a while, but as the miles passed and the highway thinned into an unfamiliar stretch of backroad lined with skeletal trees and decaying fences, she knew they were drifting off the map again. Not literally. There were still signs, still markers. But the landscape had begun to shift subtly. There were no birds, no wind. Just a long, straight path that led toward nothing. Then, as they crested a hill, a small wooden sign came into view. No lights, no arrows. Just 3 words painted in red: "Theu Markedarad." Lena sat up straighter. That wasn't on the map. Noah's jaw tightened. Nothing we need ever is. They passed it, and the air changed. It was like stepping through a curtain. Everything behind them seemed to fade slightly, like the contrast had been turned down. Trees lost their detail. Colors dulled. And the sky took on a flat, gray sheen, as if clouds had settled over this place and never left. Lena rolled down her window slightly. The air smelled like old parchment and firewood. And something else. Ash. It took another half-mile before they saw the first marker. A mailbox, rust-covered. No house nearby. Just a single word stenciled on its side on acid dye. Lena glanced at Noah. He didn't look back. "We shouldn't be here," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "We're already here." The next marker was a telephone pole, splintered halfway up, with a boot nailed to it. Beneath the boot, a laminated photograph dangled by string. A boy around 11, face blurred like it had been water, damaged. Words scrawled across the bottom. "He stayed too long." Lena's hands balled into fists on her lap. "It's not just ghosts out here. It's people. Pieces of them." Noah nodded. Left behind when the story didn't want them anymore. She stared out the window again. "How many do you think are here?" The answer came not from him, but from the side of the road where a crooked sign read, "EVRUNEOU Doni Remember." They pulled over without a word, not because they planned to, but because the car simply stopped moving. It wasn't broken. It was done. Lena stepped out first. The gravel crunched beneath her feet, but the sound felt wrong, muted like it echoed inward instead of out. The field stretched ahead of them, empty save for rows of wooden poles, each one nailed with a single sheet of paper. The wind didn't blow, but the papers moved. She walked to the first one. No name. Just a single phrase written in a child's shaky hand. "I tried to be interesting." The second, "They forgot me before I spoke." The third, "She never read my ending." Noah came to stand beside her. His eyes scanned the rows. "Are these characters?" Lena shook her head. "No. They were people before they became characters. They only turned into ghosts when we stopped reading." A long silence followed. Noah swallowed hard. "Why are we seeing this now?" She turned slowly, her voice distant. "Because we're the ones who survived. We told our story, and we got to the end." He looked at her then, understanding dawning slowly. But some people never got an ending. They just stopped. They kept walking, passing more poles, more pages, some torn, some burned. One had a mirror fragment nailed beside the paper with the words, "Don't look back," scratched into the glass. And finally, at the very center of the field, a large wooden board stood on a stone pedestal, painted black. Every inch of it covered in words written over each other, some legible, some lost to time. But one phrase repeated again and again, "You have to say their names." Lena's breath caught. She pulled the folded notes from her coat, the ones from the hallway behind the diner. She began to read them aloud, each name, each message, each plea. Noah joined her. Their voices rose, barely more than whispers at first, then louder, steadier. With every word spoken, A paper lifted from one of the poles and drifted into the air like ash, vanishing before it hit the sky. They kept going until the field was empty, until the pedestal was blank, until the wind finally began to move again. And with it a sound, not applause, not weeping, but relief. The road ahead shimmered faintly, and the car's engine rumbled back to life behind them. Noah looked over his shoulder. Was this forgiveness? Lena turned toward the road, her voice steady now. No, it was a reminder. These stories only die when we stop speaking them. They got back in the car, and this time when they drove on, there was no more fog, no more ash. Just the open road and a sky that looked like it might clear completely if given time. But Lena knew, somewhere up ahead, the next silence waited, and this time, they wouldn't look away. The road led them somewhere unexpected, not into darkness or decay, but into what looked, at first glance, like a quiet little town frozen in a dream. The welcome sign was faded but legible. Willkommen jurar EYFO PUL at UNK known WN. The word unknown had been painted in red over what must have once been a number, and that told Lena everything she needed to know. This place had once tried to count its people, tried to be seen. But something had changed. Something had taught it to stop. Greyfoot wasn't abandoned. That was the strangest part. The houses weren't collapsing. The street lamps still flickered on. Lawns were trimmed, mailboxes stood upright, and a faint whiff of freshly baked bread floated through the air as they drove into the center. But there were no people. No movement behind windows. No sounds of laughter or traffic or barking dogs. The town looked alive, but it didn't breathe. Noah slowed the car at the edge of a roundabout where a rusting statue stood. It was a child, carved from stone. Hands cupped around its mouth as if caught mid-scream. There was no plaque. Just words scratched into the base, crude and almost angry, Ti wo and te er me. Lena stepped out slowly, eyes scanning the windows. Still no sign of anyone. No birds, she murmured. Noah nodded. No echoes either. She clapped her hands once. The sound fell flat, like it had been swallowed before it could bounce. The town didn't just lack people. It lacked attention. Everything here was muted by something they couldn't see. They wandered for hours, checking storefronts, peeking into homes. Every space was filled with signs of recent life. Cups left on tables, televisions still glowing with static, newspapers folded at the edge of porches. But it all felt staged, a perfect stillness too precise to be real. It wasn't until they reached the school that Lena saw her, a girl, standing in the middle of the playground, barefoot, no coat, dirt streaking her knees, hands limp at her sides, staring at the ground. Lena ran toward her instinctively. The girl didn't move, didn't flinch. Not until Lena stepped directly into her shadow. Then her head lifted, and her eyes locked onto Lena's. They weren't empty. They were furious. "You're late," the girl whispered. Lena froze. "Do I know you?" "No," the girl replied, her voice tight, controlled. "But you were supposed to find me." Before it got quiet, Noah arrived, breathless, standing behind Lena. "Who are you?" he asked. The girl ignored him. "They stopped listening," she said. "They used to hear me, when I cried, when I screamed, even when I laughed. But then they made the mistake." "What mistake?" Lena asked. The girl took a deep breath. "They named me a lie." Lena felt the words settle in her chest like ice. She remembered that kind of exile. When a name is removed from memory, when it becomes dangerous to speak it. The kind of name people erase because it doesn't fit anymore. "What's your name?" she asked softly. The girl stared at her for a long time. Then she mouthed something, not spoke. Mouthed. A name that never reached the air. The silence around them shivered, like it hated the idea of being pierced. Lena leaned closer. "Say it again." The girl mouthed it once more. Still no sound. The air wouldn't let it pass. But Lena saw it, understood it. She turned to Noah and said it aloud, "Mallory." The moment the name passed her lips, the town moved. A wind kicked up from nowhere, sending leaves skittering across the pavement. The street lamps buzzed, flared, then snapped back into life. One by one, windows lit up, not warmly, but sharply, as if something inside each house had blinked open. The girls smiled faintly. I wasn't supposed to be forgotten. I wasn't an accident. I was just inconvenient. Lena stepped closer. What happened here? They called me trouble, Mallory said. Said I made things up, that I lied, that I didn't belong. Then one day, they stopped looking at me. I shouted until my voice bled. I slammed every door. Broke things. Nothing worked. Her fists clenched at her sides. You don't understand what it's like to be erased while still standing in the room. Lena did. Because that's what the house had tried to do to her. That's what it had done to Maris. She looked Mallory in the eye. We're listening now. The wind rose again, and the ground beneath them shook slightly. Mallory turned to the school building behind them. It started in there. The silence. The forgetting. That's where they took my voice. Noah looked at Lena. We're going back in, aren't we? She nodded. We have to. Together. They followed Mallory up the steps and through the cracked double doors. Inside, the school was dim, hallways stretching in every direction like veins. The walls were covered in paper. Student drawings, honor rolls, event calendars. But the faces in the photographs had been scratched out, names blacked over, every memory censored. Which room? Lena asked. Mallory pointed down a long hallway. Third door on the left. They walked slowly, footsteps echoing just enough to sound almost natural. Inside the room, it looked like any other abandoned classroom. Dust covered desks, a chalkboard still smudged with ghostly math problems. But at the front of the room, beside the teacher's desk, was a recorder. Old, covered in fingerprints. Mallory approached it. This is where they took it. My voice. They recorded it, then buried it. She picked it up and pressed PLY. A low hiss. Then, I didn't mean to break it. Please don't tell. If I say it was mine, they won't believe me anyway. Please just listen, please. The voice of a child. Frantic, small, raw. Then silence. And the click of someone turning the recorder off. Mallory looked at them. Now you've heard it. Noah stepped forward. We won't forget you. Lena nodded. We'll tell your story. Mallory's shoulders relaxed, and then she faded. Not tragically, not violently. She just softened at the edges, light filling her bones, until she was gone, and the town. It exhaled, windows opened. Doors creaked ajar. A cat meowed somewhere down the street. The silence lifted. Not completely, but enough to let sound back in. Lena turned to Noah. She was a warning. He nodded, and maybe a guide. They left Greyfoot as the sun finally broke through the clouds. In the rearview mirror, the sign had changed. Grufotpopulation 2 Rami Emberad, and beneath it, Cape Lastimayange. They didn't speak of Greyfoot after they left. There was nothing respectful in silence, Lena thought, but this wasn't about respect. It was about preservation. If they spoke too soon, if they tried to explain too much, the memory would warp under the weight of interpretation. Better to let it settle, breathe, and take shape on its own. She had Mallory's voice now, tucked inside her. The pain of being dismissed, the terror of screaming into ears that refused to hear. That kind of truth didn't need retelling yet. It needed time. The road rolled out ahead of them, empty and unfamiliar, but less sinister than before. The kind of emptiness that didn't loom. It waited, as if the path was giving them space to catch their breath. Lena welcomed it. She even let herself believe, for a few miles, that maybe they were done. Maybe the voices had quieted. Maybe they'd paid the debt the world kept asking of them. Then they passed the man. He stood at the edge of a dry field, his back to the road, arms loose at his sides. He wore no coat, though the wind had picked up again, biting and sharp. There was something wrong about the way he stood. Not tense, not relaxed, just unfinished. His shape blurred at the edges, as though the air hadn't decided where his body stopped and the world began. Lena turned her head just as they passed. Her breath caught. No, she said. Stop. He didn't ask why. The brakes squealed softly as they pulled over. She climbed out, boots crunching on gravel, her heartbeat rising not from fear, but recognition. She didn't know the man. She was sure of that. But she knew what he was. She had seen something like him before. In nightmares that didn't end. In mirrors that didn't show her reflection until the second glance. He was still facing away, unmoving. "Noah," she whispered as he caught up to her. "Can you see his face?" They walked closer, slow and cautious. 20 feet away, she realized the man had no shadow. 10 feet away, she realized his feet didn't touch the ground. At 5 feet, he turned. His face was not a face. It was blank, not like Mallory's faceless form, not like something erased. It was more like it had never been written to begin with. No mouth, no eyes, just skin stretched too tight, pulled over something that didn't know what a person was supposed to look like. A suit clung to his frame, dirty and soaked at the hems, as though he'd climbed from somewhere deep and wet. But what struck Lena most was the sensation that he was somehow wearing human shape like a mask. Not to pass for one, but to remind himself how it felt. He didn't speak, but a voice slid into her thoughts like ice through an open window. "You left me." Noah staggered back. "You hear that?" Lena asked. Noah shook his head, face pale. "Hear what?" The voice returned. "You knew me once. But the edges blurred. I asked to be held in your mind, and you let me bleed out." Lena's knees weakened slightly. This wasn't one of the forgotten stories. This wasn't a child or a victim. This was something else. Something built by neglect. Something that had never truly lived, but had grown anyway. "I don't know you," she whispered aloud. But that wasn't true. Not entirely. The more she stared at him, the more her mind scratched at some half-buried image, a doodle she used to draw as a child. A figure without a face, always standing at the edge of her pictures. Sometimes in the background of a crowd. Sometimes behind a tree. She'd never named him, never gave him dialogue or purpose. But she had drawn him again and again, and eventually stopped. He had no name, because she'd never given him one. "You're not real," she said, voice trembling. The air twisted around her. "You made me. You forgot me. That makes me more real than anything." Noah grabbed her shoulder. "We need to leave. Now." But she couldn't move. Not yet. "Why now?" she asked the thing. "Why come back now?" "Because the world is listening again. And I want to speak." It stepped closer. Lena stumbled back. And then Noah moved between them, without warning, without fear. "No," he said, and the thing paused, not from confusion, from curiosity. "You don't belong here," Noah continued, his voice steady. "You're a shadow that was never cast. You're the space between stories, not a story yourself." Lena blinked. She hadn't realized it before, but Noah had seen him. Maybe not fully, maybe not in the shape she did. But he recognized the danger. "You were made by accident," Noah said. "And now you're looking for authorship." The figure tilted its head. A ripple passed through its form. And then, for the first time, it moved back, not far. Just enough. It was listening. Noah pressed on. "If you want to be remembered, then earn it. Don't haunt. Speak." The wind stopped, the field stilled, and the figure opened its mouth, slowly, impossibly, and a single sound came through. Not words, just a long, low note, a tone. It filled the air, vibrating everything inside Lena's bones. And then it was gone. So was he. The field empty once more. Lena gasped, breath returning hard and fast. Her legs gave out and she dropped to her knees. Noah knelt beside her. "You okay?" She nodded, though she wasn't. What was that?" He looked toward where the figure had vanished. A reminder. Even things we make without meaning can come looking for it. They returned to the car. Neither of them spoke for a long time. But as the engine rumbled and the tires rolled forward once more, Lena whispered to herself, "I remember you now." And in the sky behind them, clouds took the shape of something tall and faceless before dissolving into rain. Rain blurred the windshield, thin sheets running down the glass like the sky itself was crying slow, unending tears. The wipers swiped methodically, but the rhythm only made the silence louder inside the car. Lena's fingers drummed against the passenger door, restless, her mind replaying the man with no edges again and again. His formless face, the soundless scream of something that had once begged to exist. It lingered in her mind like an ink stain, seeping into every other thought. Noah drove without speaking. The road ahead was nearly invisible now, a watery smear of gray and silver, but he didn't slow. There was nowhere to stop, no signs, no exits, just the endless highway, and the map that no longer mattered. The further they traveled, the more Lena noticed how the world seemed to be forgetting itself. Trees had no leaves, no shape. Power lines slanted the wrong way, sagging into the fog. And then she saw the bridge. It rose out of the mist like something dredged up from a dream, massive, skeletal, and colorless. Steel bones arched into the sky, barely visible through the downpour. No signs marked its name. No lights guided the path. But Lena knew they had to cross it. She could feel the weight of that certainty drop into her stomach like a stone. As they approached, the car began to shake, not violently, but subtly. A vibration beneath the tires, as though the bridge were humming a sound too deep to hear, only to feel. The kind of frequency that made your blood respond before your mind did. Noah hesitated. "You feel that?" Lena nodded. "It's not just the bridge." They rolled forward. The rain grew heavier, not wetter, louder. The pattering became a whisper, 1,000 voices speaking at once. It was as if the rain had stopped being weather and started being language. Each drop a syllable, an echo. Lena leaned closer to the window, straining to listen. But they're still underneath. "Don't look down." The toll is memory. She jolted back in her seat. "Noah," she said, her voice urgent now. "Stop the car." He pressed the brakes. The vehicle halted in the middle of the bridge. Beneath them, the metal trembled softly. "I heard voices," Lena whispered. "The rain, it's not just noise." Noah turned the engine off. Silence returned for half a second. Then the whispers surged in through the windows, clearer now. They buried the names. "Don't forget your own." Lena's hands trembled. She stepped out into the rain. "No," Noah shouted. But she didn't stop. The moment her feet touched the bridge outside the car, the world shifted. Rain struck her skin like ink, soaking her shirt, her hair, her eyelashes. But it didn't sting. It soaked through her memories instead. Blurred the lines between what she remembered and what she thought she remembered. The bridge beneath her glistened unnaturally, not from water, but from words. Every step forward revealed new ones, etched into the metal like scars. Names. Dozens, hundreds, some full, some only fragments. Lena knelt and touched one. Margaret Ellis, 1981, told the truth, paid the toll. Another, Leland S., never came back, and another, newly formed, the lines still bleeding like fresh cuts, Eliza Marsh. Wither Lane. Her heart stuttered. She turned and shouted toward the car.
"Noah! Eliza's name is here!"
He didn't move. He was staring at something behind her. Lena turned and saw them, figures beneath the bridge, dozens of them. Faces turned up toward her through the slats. Their skin slick with water, eyes wide and unblinking. They weren't standing on anything. Just there, suspended in the mist like a photograph printed on fog. One figure raised a hand and pointed to her. And Lena felt a pulse in her head, like a memory trying to escape. She stumbled back, but the metal vibrated beneath her shoes, anchoring her. "They're not ghosts," she said aloud. "They're stories that never finished crossing." The toll, she remembered the whisper. The toll is memory. Lena turned back to the car.
"No! What do we owe?"
"What's the price?" But when she looked inside the vehicle, he wasn't there. Just his coat, crumpled in the seat, her chest seized. She whipped around. He wasn't on the bridge either. Gone. No sound of doors. No movement. The bridge vibrated again, stronger now. The mist rolled thicker, coiling upward, swallowing the edges of the world. and the whispers changed. They weren't strangers' voices anymore. They were hers. I left her behind. I closed my eyes when she screamed holler that I forgot on purpose. Lena covered her ears.
No!
But the bridge didn't care. A voice louder than the rest tore through her mind. What will you give up to cross? She clutched her head, dropping to her knees. What would she give? What could she give? Not Maris. Not Eliza. Not Mallory. She had fought too hard to keep them alive in her mind. But then it came to her. There was still one memory she had never faced. The one from the very beginning. The one she never told anyone. The night her sister died. The truth was, she had seen something. A figure standing just beyond the crib. Not Eliza. Not Maris. A tall shape, its body folding in on itself. Speaking in a voice that didn't belong in this world. It had turned and looked at her. And she had run. She hadn't screamed. Hadn't fought. She had left her. That was the real toll. Lena opened her mouth and screamed into the mist.
I remember!
The bridge shook. The rain stopped. The whispers went silent. And then, Noah stood beside her again, as if he had never left. His eyes were wet, his skin pale. But he looked at her with understanding. You paid it, he whispered. Lena nodded. I finally remembered the truth. They walked the rest of the bridge in silence. Behind them, the names faded. The figures beneath the slats dissolved. And the road continued. No signs. No towns. But Lena's heart felt lighter. For the first time in her life, she wasn't carrying it alone. The road bent into itself, curling through dense woods that had no name. There were no birds in the trees. No insects buzzing in the underbrush. Only the distant groan of branches shifting under their own weight, as though the forest resented being awake. Lena watched the trees blur past her window, half aware of her own reflection in the glass, pale and sharpened by sleeplessness. Every mile they drove seemed to pull something out of her, like a string unraveling inside her chest. They had passed bridges and fields and hollow towns, each one a scream of some forgotten name, but none of them prepared her for what waited ahead. The trees parted suddenly, and the house appeared. Not like something built, but something waiting. It sat on a shallow hill with a wraparound porch and a roof that slouched slightly to the left. Its windows were dark. Its paint had peeled in long, curling strips. Yet somehow it didn't look abandoned. It looked aware. It didn't look like the house from before. Not exactly. But Lena recognized it all the same. It was like a memory that had shifted just enough to make you question if it had ever been real. Noah slowed the car, pulling to a stop at the base of the hill. We don't have to go in, he said, but his voice betrayed the lie. They both knew the story wouldn't let them leave unfinished. Lena stepped out first, the air biting through her sleeves. It wasn't cold in the usual sense. It was the kind of air that remembered being cold. That still carried the shape of winter in its breath. The ground squelched underfoot, soft and uneven, as though the hill had been moved recently, like the house had dragged itself here and simply settled in. Noah joined her, staring up at the structure. It looks different. It is, she said. It's been changing. Every time we get closer, it gets further away from what it was. Why would it do that? Because it knows we're watching now. It's adapting. He turned to her. So what is it now? She looked at the windows. No reflections, no movement. And then up at the second floor, where a single curtain swayed, though there was no breeze. It's bait. They climbed the porch steps slowly, each one creaking in a way that felt rehearsed. The door was ajar, not wide, just enough to suggest it had been waiting for them. Lena pushed it open with 2 fingers, and the darkness inside spilled out like ink in water. The moment they crossed the threshold, the house sighed. It wasn't a sound, exactly. More like a shift in pressure. The air got thicker, the light colder. The floorboards beneath their feet adjusted, as though waking up. The house wasn't welcoming, it was acknowledging. The foyer stretched into a hallway that had no visible end. Photographs lined the walls, but every face had been blurred or scratched out. Lena approached one, rubbing her thumb over the glass. The image distorted slightly, showing a young girl standing in a field of tall grass. No eyes, no mouth, just a smear of a smile too wide for her face. "I've seen her before," Lena whispered. Noah moved beside her. She was in the mirror, at the motel. They kept moving. The hallway seemed to pulse with every step, elongating and twisting just slightly, like it didn't agree with the idea of physics anymore. Doors lined the walls, closed tight, some nailed shut. One had something painted on it in black ink, "Do, notio pen walu ildaremng." They didn't touch it. Eventually, the hallway ended in a room they didn't expect. A child's bedroom. Simple, clean. The walls were pale blue. A twin bed sat against the far wall, sheets neatly tucked. A stuffed rabbit rested on the pillow, one eye missing. A bookshelf stood in the corner, its titles dusty and sun-faded but familiar. Lena stepped closer and read the spines. My First Myths. The Girl with No End. Eliza's Window. She pulled that last one off the shelf. There was no author. The pages inside were blank, save for the very last one. Written in small, precise handwriting, "You keep writing me back into it." She closed the book slowly. A creak came from behind them. The door to the room had shut. Noah tried the knob. It didn't budge. The air grew tighter. The lights dimmed. Then the rabbit on the bed moved. Not a twitch. Not a trick of the eye. It sat up, its one remaining eye turned toward them, and its sewn mouth began to open. From inside came a child's voice. "You don't belong in here anymore." Lena stepped back. "Who are you?" she asked. The rabbit didn't move again, but the voice continued. "You gave me your fear. You built the house with it. Every time you closed your eyes, every time you lied about what you saw, you made me a room." The walls shuddered. Posters peeled. The floor creaked with movement that didn't belong to footsteps. Noah grabbed Lena's hand. "It's not the house that's moving." "What is it?" "It's us." The room folded. The walls closed in, not physically, but conceptually. The space itself began to forget its shape. Corners unbent. Gravity staggered. For a moment, they weren't in the room anymore. They were inside the idea of it. Then silence. And then something knocked. 3 slow knocks. Not from outside the room, but from inside the bed. The mattress lifted slightly, as if breathing. And the voice spoke again, louder now. "Let me finish the story." Noah shook his head. "No, that's what it wants. We give it an ending, it gets stronger." But Lena understood. The house wasn't trying to trap them. Not anymore. It was begging. Every corner they'd explored, every voice they'd remembered, had been a plea, not to haunt, but to be held. She stepped toward the bed, lifted the blanket. Underneath there was no child, no body. Just paper. Dozens of pages, each one covered in writing. A story, a life, a memory. Lena began to read, one line at a time, her voice steady. Each word lit the air, burning brighter with every sentence. And the house began to still. The walls held. The light returned, and the bedroom sighed. Not in pain, but in relief. Noah touched her shoulder. "What did you do?" She handed him the last page. He read the final line. She remembered the house wasn't evil. It was unfinished. They walked back through the hallway. This time, it was shorter. The photographs on the walls had faces now. The door opened without resistance. And when they stepped outside, the house behind them faded. Not crumbled, not burned. Just released. As though it had never needed to be feared in the first place. Just finished. And Lena knew they were getting closer to the end. But the story still had one more turn. By the time they reached the motel, some nameless place off a 2-lane road Lena didn't remember turning onto, the sun had already begun to sink. It blotted across the sky in shades too vibrant to be natural, casting the world in bruised orange and rusted red. They didn't talk much. The house had taken something from both of them. Not in the violent, horrifying way the earlier places had, but quietly. Subtly. As if finishing its story required a toll they hadn't known they were paying. Lena felt it in her chest, a sense of weightlessness where something solid had once sat. Not loss, exactly. Just the feeling that something important had been handed off. The motel lobby was empty. No desk clerk, no bell. Just a plastic key holder with numbered tags and a sign that read Kiachos Carfel Ly. Lena took key 5 without hesitation. Noah didn't ask why. They walked in silence down a hallway lit only by wall sconces that buzzed with low, angry light. Room 5 was at the end. The door stuck as she turned the knob, but eventually gave way with a reluctant groan. The room was clean, unsettlingly so. The bed was made, the carpet vacuumed in neat rows, but something in the air was wrong. Too still, too curated. Like someone had spent hours making the room look like no one had ever stayed in it. Noah tossed his bag on the bed and flopped down with a sigh, while Lena walked toward the corner where a faint outline in the carpet caught her eye. A square, slightly darker than the rest, barely visible in the lamplight. She knelt, running her fingers across it. A seam, a trapdoor. She glanced back at Noah, but he hadn't moved. His eyes were open, but distant, like he was watching something on a screen that only he could see. She lifted the square of carpet. Beneath it, wood, old, rough, splintered, and in the center, a name carved deep and crooked Ilze. The air dropped 10 degrees. Noah sat up sharply. "What did you just say?" Lena hadn't said anything, but the name hung in the room now like a scent. He must have felt it. She pried the wood up slowly. Beneath was darkness. Not a space, not a tunnel, just dark. A blackness so dense it felt like a solid thing, like it would bite her hand if she reached in, but she didn't need to reach. The darkness rose to meet her, and from within it came a voice she hadn't heard in years. "You let me fall." Lena recoiled instinctively. Her knees hit the floor hard, but the pain didn't register. She remembered now. The memory was sharp, vicious. A crack in the world she'd spent most of her life patching with lies. It wasn't just that Eliza had died in the house. She had called out first, begged Lena not to leave, begged her to come back, and Lena had pretended not to hear. A child's fear had been greater than a sister's love. The darkness rippled like water disturbed. Noah reached out to her, but stopped short. He saw it too now, not with his eyes, but with something deeper. "You can still say her name," he whispered. Lena shook her head. "I already did." "No," he said, "you remembered her. But you never said it to her." Her hands shook. "What if she hates me?" Noah didn't answer, because that was the truth they both feared. But it didn't matter. Lena leaned forward, her voice hoarse. "Eliza." The darkness paused. "I hear you." The black began to curl upward, climbing the walls like smoke, like fingers stretching toward sound. "I was afraid," she continued. "I didn't mean to leave you. I told myself it was too late, that you were already gone. But I knew you weren't, and I let the silence eat you." The room vibrated. The walls cracked, not with violence, but pressure, like the story inside them was pushing out. "I don't know if you'll ever forgive me," Lena whispered, "but I will never forget again." The darkness retreated. It didn't vanish. It folded, curling back into the hole beneath the floor like it had finally been heard. And then, light, just a sliver under the boards. Lena reached in, no longer afraid. Her fingers touched something small. She pulled it out slowly. A locket. Old, tarnished, heart-shaped. Inside was a photo, 2 girls. One older, one small, both smiling. Both whole, her breath caught. "I remember this," she whispered. "She gave it to me the day before." Her voice trailed off. She clutched the locket to her chest. Noah sat beside her on the floor. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. A warmth filled the room, not heat, not comfort, just presence. Like Eliza was there, just out of sight, no longer buried beneath guilt or silence. And outside, the storm broke. Rain hammered the windows for the first time in hours. But it wasn't a warning. It was release. A cleansing. As if the world had been waiting for her to say the name that had always been inside her. And now that she had, it could finally let her go. Lena sat with her back against the bed, eyes closed, the locket pressed to her heart. When she finally spoke, it was only 3 words. Soft, steady, real. I see you. The morning came in quietly. No fanfare, no dreams, no nightmares, just the slow re-entry of sound. Birds chirping somewhere far off, tires humming on a distant road, the faint creak of motel plumbing. But for Lena, something else had changed. The world didn't feel like it was breathing down her neck anymore. The guilt that had clung to her skin for years, for Eliza, had softened. Not disappeared, but shifted. The kind of grief that no longer clawed at her throat, but sat with her instead. It had shaped now. A locket's weight against her chest. She stood by the window, watching a transmission tower blink red through the foggy distance. It stood like a sentinel over the trees, humming something ancient, a pulse. A rhythm too steady to be nature. She hadn't noticed it the night before. Maybe it hadn't been there then. Maybe it only appeared once she was ready to hear it. No, stirred behind her. What time is it? Doesn't matter, she said, not turning. We need to go. That tower, it's calling us. He sat up slowly. Why would a transmission tower be calling us? Because it's not sending a signal, she replied. It's catching one. They drove in silence, the path toward the blinking light clearer than any map could be. As they neared it, the trees thinned into rusted chain link fences and cracked concrete. The air buzzed, low, almost imperceptible. Like a sound just under the threshold of hearing. Lena knew it wasn't electrical. It was voices. The tower loomed above a small brick building barely larger than a shack. A door hung half open, creaking in rhythm with the wind. The entire place reeked of ozone and something older, something metallic and burned. They stepped inside, half expecting static, dust, rot. But the air was clean, cold. Inside, banks of old analog equipment lined the walls. Switchboards, reels, dials, all flickering with power despite having no visible source. At the center of the room stood a single microphone. It was old, 1950s style, the kind meant for war announcements or radio dramas. But the strange part wasn't the age. It was the fact that it was on. No wires. No switches. Just a steady, warm glow pulsing from its base. As they stepped closer, the air tightened again. And then the microphone spoke. Not static. Not garbled. Just one clear sentence. Your story has been received. Lena's blood ran cold. The voice wasn't mechanical. It wasn't male or female. It wasn't even human. It was layered. Like it had been built from every voice she had ever heard, stitched together into something too perfect. Noah flinched. What the hell is this? The microphone spoke again. You've reached the final act. But endings are earned, not taken. Lena moved toward it slowly. Who are you? A pause. I'm the listener. The collector. The one who remembers when no one else will. It didn't answer like a person. It answered like a force. Like a library that had grown a mouth. Lena placed a hand near the mic but didn't touch it. Why now? She asked. Why speak to us? Because you've said enough of the truth to be heard. Something shifted in the walls. Old reel to reel machines began spinning, playing faint sounds in tandem. A scream. A child's laugh. A lullaby. The crash of glass. The final breath of a story once told and forgotten. The room became a chorus of memory. And then, on the far wall, a screen lit up. Footage began to play. Home videos. Grainy. Washed in the color of old film. A girl, Eliza, laughing on a swing. A birthday cake being cut. A flashlight under the covers. The moment Lena first saw the thing in the corner of their childhood room. The shape that haunted her. She watched herself run. The camera didn't blink. The images kept coming. School hallways. The house on Wither Lane. The motel. Greyfoot. Each place they had been. Each name they had spoken. The stories had been recorded. Preserved. This place had watched everything. The screen froze on an image of Mallory, then flicked to Eliza's blurred face in the basement. Then to the faceless man on the road. Then to Lena's face, older now, afraid, resolute. The microphone flared again. There's one name left. Lena's throat dried. Whose? The screen changed again. This time, the image showed something impossible, a reflection of her current self, with eyes missing. A mouth sewn shut, and written across her chest, in glowing white letters, "The girl du orot esercielfo woot." She staggered back. "I never." But Noah was staring at the screen now too. He understood before she did. "You didn't survive the house," he whispered. "Not all of you." The microphone pulsed. "You left a part of yourself behind, a thread unspoken, a name never said." Lena turned to it. "Then give it to me." Silence. Then the screen flashed white, and in the hum of the tower, in the low rise of sound that had been building all along, she heard it. Her own voice, saying her true name. Not Lena, but the one she'd buried. The one she'd erased after Eliza's death. The one that reminded her too much of failure, of a version of herself too frightened to stay behind. Alina. The room surged with power. Machines whirled to life. The microphone exploded in light, and then everything shut off. The tower went dark. The buzz stopped. The air settled. And Lena, Alina, stood in the silence of what had once been a broadcasting room. Only now it wasn't listening. It had spoken, and the message had been delivered. She turned to Noah. "I'm not hiding anymore." He nodded, slowly. "Then we finish this." She stepped out into the fading light. The sky stretched wide ahead. And in the far-off horizon, the silhouette of the house waited, final, unmoving. The ending wasn't behind them. It had always been ahead. The dirt road narrowed as they neared the edge of the valley, coiling like a snake between trees stripped bare by wind and time. No signs marked their destination, but Alina now, didn't need directions anymore. The path remembered her, the ground shaping itself around each footstep, guiding her toward the place where her reflection had been waiting all along. With every mile, her new name settled deeper inside her, like a key turning slowly in an old lock. Not just a sound, not just a label, but the truth of who she had been before fear rewrote her. Noah kept pace beside her, quiet. He had watched her transform, not physically, but in posture, in breath. He hadn't said her name since they left the tower, but she could feel it vibrating in the space between them, unspoken but real. It had power now, not in the way of spells or curses, but like an anchor dropped into shifting seas. A route threading through years of broken soil. They crested the hill at dusk. Below them lay a clearing, not wide, not deep, just enough to cradle what waited. Not a house, not a grave, a mirror, massive. Embedded into the earth like it had fallen from the sky and never cracked. Its surface was dark, endless, still as water and hard as stone. The wind didn't touch it. Leaves swirled around it, but never landed. And Alina understood immediately. This wasn't a mirror meant to reflect. It was meant to trap. She took a slow breath and descended the hill, boots crunching on old pine needles and glassy stones. Noah followed, but stayed back as they reached the edge. She could feel the pull, a soft throb in her chest, like something beneath the mirror recognized her and was reaching up to meet her gaze. She stood at the rim and looked down. It showed her, of course, but not her as she was. Her reflection didn't move in sync. It blinked out of rhythm. It smiled when she didn't. The face staring back was hers, yes, but filtered through everything she had chosen to forget. Every lie she'd told herself to stay upright. Every excuse. Every flinch. The version of her that ran. The version that left Eliza. Alina dropped to her knees. The glass pulsed beneath her fingers. A voice came, not from above, not from within, but from beneath. "You buried me." It wasn't Eliza. It was her. The girl she used to be. The one who screamed in her sleep and never told anyone why. The one who drew faceless men on notebook corners. The one who watched her sister disappear and decided never to speak about it again. Alina whispered, "I didn't know how to carry you. So you buried me." The voice repeated, more patient now. "You changed the name. You changed the story. But I'm still here, waiting to be pulled out of the dark." The mirror rippled. Noah called from behind Alina, "Something's moving." But she didn't turn. She kept her eyes locked on the reflection, because it was standing now, not kneeling, not broken. The trapped girl, young Alina, was whole, smiling even. "You're not coming back to take my place," she said gently. "You're coming back to hold me." And then the glass shattered. Not loudly, not violently. It cracked like ice under a single step. Splinters spread out, not jagged, but deliberate, like veins in marble. And then the reflection rose from the glass, not ghostly, not spectral, but real. Flesh and breath and sound, a perfect replica of her younger self, clothed in memory. Noah stepped closer, unsure. "What is this?" Alina turned to him, her eyes wet but steady. "It's not a monster. It's not a trick." She faced the girl again. "It's the version of me I tried to erase." The girl nodded, and together, without needing to speak, they stepped forward, into each other. There was no blinding light, no thunder, just a slow exhale, like two puzzle pieces finally clicking into place after years spent in different boxes. Alina staggered but didn't fall. Noah caught her elbow. "You okay?" She smiled faintly. "I think I'm finally whole." The mirror in the earth had vanished. In its place, a circle of soil darker than the rest, not scorched, not cursed, just used, like it had finally served its purpose. The air shifted, somewhere behind them. Wind moved through trees that had not made a sound in days. And Noah, always more sensitive to the energy than he liked to admit, turned slowly. "They're here," he murmured. Alina looked too, and in the distance, between the trees, she saw them. Figures. Dozens. All the ones they had remembered. Mallory, the man without edges, the faceless crowd from the bridge, the girl in the swing. All of them watching. Not threatening, just present. Their eyes wide with a question. And Alina understood it. They weren't asking to be avenged. Or saved. They were asking what happens next. She stepped forward. "We finish it," she said. "We end the forgetting. We carry the names. We tell them." The forest exhaled. The figures bowed their heads, once, gently, and vanished. The wind carried the quiet that followed like a secret whispered across the land. And Alina, standing where the mirror once lay, finally felt light enough to move again. There were two parts left in this story, and the road ahead no longer twisted to confuse them. It pointed straight toward the house, toward the heart of everything, where the real name waited, where Eliza waited, where the end had always lived. They reached it just before nightfall. No signs, no gates, no warnings, just the house, unchanged, untouched by time, waiting like it always had. But this time, it wasn't veiled in fog or dressed in illusions. The air was sharp with clarity. The shingles, the porch, the ivy crawling halfway up the siding. It was all exactly as it had been the night Eliza vanished. For the first time in years, the house wasn't hiding. It was ready. Alina stepped out of the car and into memory. Every part of her resisted. Her body knew this place better than her mind ever had. Muscles tightened. Breathing shortened. But her feet moved anyway. The same steps she had taken as a child, but heavier now, deliberate. Noah followed in silence, watching the windows, the door, the corners of the roof, places where things had waited before. But nothing stirred, no shapes in the curtains, no shadows at the corners. Just that strange, thick silence. A silence not empty, but full. When they reached the porch, the boards didn't creak like they used to. The sound was softer now, like the house was remembering her too. The door opened before she could reach for the knob, and in the doorway stood a woman. She wasn't old, wasn't young. Her hair fell around her shoulders like curtains, black and still. Her face was familiar, but not because Alina had seen her before. She was familiar the way a dream is, the kind that wraps around you without explanation, the kind that leaves you hollow the moment you wake. She smiled. "You came back," she said. Her voice wasn't warm, it wasn't cold either. It was truthful. Alina opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The woman stepped aside, holding the door open. "It's time," she said simply. Alina entered. The inside was exactly as she remembered. down to the scent of old wood and soap and the faint sour trace of something that had died too long ago. The wallpaper still curled in the corners. The floorboards were still uneven. Every crack, every stain, every distant echo belonged to the night she had tried to forget. Noah stepped in behind her, and the door shut on its own. The woman didn't follow them, because she wasn't really there. She was part of it, part of the house, a memory the house had conjured to open itself. They passed the living room, where the TV still faced the floral couch, past the hallway, where the wallpaper rippled faintly like breath. They didn't need to guess where to go. The house showed them. Doors opened quietly before they could reach them. Lights flickered to life without switches. It was no longer pretending to be ordinary. The performance was over. It led them to the basement door. Alina placed her hand on the knob. "I'm scared," she admitted. Noah didn't try to fix it. "So am I," and together they descended. Each step down was like a year peeled away. The wood underfoot grew colder. The air thickened, not with dust, but with memory, like they were descending into a well dug not into the ground, but into a mind. When they reached the bottom, they expected rot, cobwebs, horror, but it was clean, bare, a concrete floor, a single chair, a mirror on the far wall, nothing else, except a girl sitting in the chair. Eliza, not just a vision, not a ghost. Her. Alina knew before the girl looked up. The same hair, the same wide eyes, the same quiet defiance in her expression. But older now, as if the house hadn't just trapped her body, but her growth. Frozen here, developing in time but never in place. Eliza rose slowly, legs unsure at first, like someone waking from the longest sleep. She looked at Alina, and didn't smile. "You left me," she said. The words didn't strike like accusations. They landed like facts. "I know," Alina said. Tears welled in her throat, but she didn't let them fall. "I was afraid. I didn't understand what I saw. I ran, and then I buried you in silence." Eliza stepped forward. "Why now?" "Because I finally remembered the name I was supposed to carry. The version of myself I buried to survive." "And what do you want now?" Alina's voice cracked. "To bring you home." For a long moment, Eliza didn't move. Then she reached out and touched Alina's chest, right where the locket rested beneath her shirt. "You kept it." Alina nodded. "It's all I had left of you." Eliza smiled, not soft, not kind, but proud. The mirror behind her shimmered. Its surface became a window, not into another world, but into their world. Their old bedroom. The swing in the backyard. Their mother's voice calling them in for dinner. Things long gone. Things they could never reclaim. "I can't leave," Eliza said. "Not without giving it something." Alina turned to Noah. What does she mean? But he already knew. He'd seen the pattern. Every place they'd been, every story they'd uncovered, had ended in one truth. You can't leave without giving a part of yourself. The house doesn't take, it asks. Eliza placed a hand on Alina's forehead. "Give me your silence." The thing that had kept her quiet for all these years. The part of her that refused to speak the truth. Alina breathed in once, then nodded, and something shifted, not inside her, but around her. The basement groaned. The walls rippled. The mirror cracked, not shattered, not broken, just split down the middle like a choice being made. Eliza stepped into the mirror and vanished, but not into darkness, into light. And when it cleared, she was standing beside them, real, alive, not rescued, returned. Alina collapsed to her knees. Noah rushed to her side. The house began to hum, not menacingly, not like it wanted to keep them, but like it was relieved. Upstairs, doors unlocked, windows open. The front door swung wide, and for the first time in years, the house exhaled, because its story had finally been finished. Not erased, not rewritten. Completed. As they stepped outside, Eliza shielding her eyes from the sun she hadn't seen in over a decade, Alina looked back at the place that had once swallowed them whole, and she whispered the only goodbye it deserved. "Thank you for remembering her when I couldn't." The house stood silent. but the wind through its broken shutters almost sounded like an answer. They didn't speak as they walked away from the house. It didn't feel like a moment for words. The sky above was unusually clear, a deep, endless kind of blue that stretched with eerie stillness. The gravel crunched under their feet, but even that sound seemed softened, respectful somehow. Behind them, the house remained in full view, not fading into mist, not collapsing into ruins, not vanishing like so many other haunted things had. It simply stayed quiet and whole, because it had finally told the story it was meant to. Eliza walked slightly behind them, eyes taking in every detail like a child seeing the world for the first time. But there was no fear in her gaze, no confusion. She hadn't come back broken. She had come back finished. And maybe that was the strangest part of all. Not that they had survived, but that they had ended something. So much of what they had endured felt designed to drag on forever. Endless hallways, names no one remembered, mirrors that led nowhere. But this was the last page turning. They reached the car, and for a long moment, no one moved. Alina stood with her hand on the door, the wind pushing her hair across her cheek. She could still feel the weight of her old name tugging at her back like a chain buried in her spine. Lena, the version of herself who had run, who had silenced Eliza's memory, who had pretended not to see the darkness when it first began to eat at their lives. That name would always exist, somewhere lingering like smoke on old clothes, but it wasn't hers anymore. Eliza broke the silence. Where do we go now? Noah smiled faintly, hands in his pockets. Anywhere. There's no map left. Alina looked out over the trees. The tower in the distance had gone dark. The motel had vanished behind them. All the haunted places were behind them now, left with their own stories, their own wounds. Maybe others would find them. Maybe not. That wasn't her burden anymore. I think we go forward, she said finally. They got in the car, and as the engine turned, the radio flared to life on its own. No static, no music, just a soft voice, familiar, calm, not speaking to frighten or confuse, but to close. Some stories are meant to end. Others stay behind like echoes, whispering until someone decides to listen. You heard them. You answered. And now, the rest is silence. The signal cut off. The radio died. But none of them touched the dial. There was no need. The road ahead was unpaved, overgrown in parts, but visible. It hadn't been before. It had always twisted and looped back into itself, keeping them trapped in the web of their own forgetting. Now, it stretched on like a scar healing over time. They drove for hours. Towns blinked past, new names, new faces. Gas stations and diners and quiet places full of life. Nothing spoke back from the walls. Nothing watched them from the windows. The world no longer whispered their names. And yet, as the sun dipped low and cast golden light across the highway, Alina felt the stories still inside her. Not ghosts, not trauma, but truth. They weren't just haunting her. They belonged to her now. She carried them in her chest, her bones, her voice. She could speak them if she wanted, or she could let them rest. Eventually, they pulled off onto a hill overlooking a wide field. Wildflowers stretched in every direction, caught in the breath of the wind. Eliza stepped out first and ran into the tall grass, arms open, laughing like she'd never forgotten how. Noah followed with a grin. Alina stayed back a moment, hand brushing the locket around her neck. And then she did something she hadn't done in years. She opened it. Inside were the same two faces the girls who had been, but now a third had joined them, not added by hand, not drawn, just there, her own face now, older, whole, named. She closed the locket gently, set it on the dash, and stepped out into the wind. Eliza called to her. Alina ran to her sister. The field echoed with their laughter. And behind them, for the first time in decades, the house on Wither Lane began to crumble. Not from rot or rage, but release. The story had been told. The forgetting was over, and the last page turned itself.